An alpha king doesn't fall because he's weak. Heart falls because those who should stand beside him choose to watch him bleed instead. What happens when the man bred to rule discovers his own pack wants him dead? When survival means clawing back from a grave they dug with lies? You're about to find out. This isn't a fairy tale. This is what happens when power meets betrayal and refuses to die quiet. Stay till the end, hit that like, and drop your city in the comments. Let me know where my pack is watching from. What bitten? The arrow should have killed him. It didn't whistle, didn't announce itself, just cut through the evening air like a breath held too long, aimed at the space between King Rhaegor Varen's shoulder blades where armor gave way to flesh. 3 inches lower, and it would have pierced his heart. 2 inches right, and his lung would have collapsed before he hit the marble. Instead, it buried itself in the shoulder of a girl nobody looked at twice. She crumpled without a sound. No scream, no gasp. Just dropped like her strings had been cut, blood spreading dark across the plain gray fabric they dressed the servants in. The kind of fabric meant to make you invisible. The kind that worked. Rhaegor turned. Instinct, not thought. His hand was already on his blade before his mind caught up to what his body knew. Something had moved wrong in his periphery. Something had changed the air. The girl lay at his feet, face down, still. One arm twisted beneath her at an angle that made his jaw clench. The arrow jutted from her shoulder, black-fletched and unfamiliar. Not palace colors, not any colors he recognized. His guards swarmed, boots hammering marble, shouting directions that meant nothing and everything. Lockdown, seal the perimeter, find the archer. Standard protocols for when someone tries to kill a king and fails by accident. But Rhaegor wasn't looking at his guards. He was looking at her. She was young. 17, maybe 18. Thin in the way that came from rationed meals and hard work, not breeding. Her hair was brown, ordinary, pulled back in a braid that had come half undone. There was nothing remarkable about her except for one thing. She'd stepped between him and death, and he hadn't even known she was there. The captain of his guard, Torvin, appeared at his elbow. Big man, scarred face, voice like gravel in a bucket. Loyal to the point of stupidity, which was exactly why Rhaegor kept him close. Torvin's eyes were on the rooftops, scanning for threats. She's breathing, sire. Barely. Arrow missed the artery, but she's losing blood fast. Rhaegor knelt. His knee hit marble hard enough to hurt. He didn't care. Up close, he could see the pulse in her neck. Thin. Erratic. Fighting. Who is she? Servant, sire? Kitchen detail, I think. One of the... I didn't ask what she is. I asked who. Torvin hesitated. That hesitation told Rhaegor everything. Nobody knew. She was one of the invisible ones, the kind who scrubbed floors and hauled water and disappeared into walls when nobility walked past. Stormhaven had dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. He'd never counted. He should have. The girl's eyes cracked open. Just barely. Enough for him to see they were gray. Not silver like the old bloodlines. Not blue like the northern packs. Gray, flat and unreflective as winter stone. She looked at him, right at him, through him maybe. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Rhaegor caught her before her head hit marble. She weighed nothing. Less than nothing. A wolf built for dominance should not be this light. Should not feel like dried leaves in his hands. Get the healers. Now. Torvin didn't move. Sire, we need to secure you first. Protocol demands? I don't give a damn about protocol. She took an arrow meant for me and you're worried about procedure? The silence that followed was the kind that drew blood without breaking skin. His guards knew that tone, knew what happened when their king's voice dropped below a certain register. It wasn't anger. Anger was loud. This was something older, something that lived in the bones of predators. Torvin's jaw worked. The healers are for... I know what they're for, and I'm telling you to use them. For a servant? The words hung in the air like a noose. Rhaegor stood, slowly, the girl still in his arms. She was bleeding on his coat. Royal blue silk, custom-tailored, worth more than she'd earned in 5 years. The blood was soaking through to his shirt. He didn't put her down. His voice came out quiet, controlled, the way a blade sounds sliding from its sheath. Say that again. Torvin went pale. Sire, I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said, that her life is worth less because she scrubs dishes instead of wearing a crown. That nobility is measured in titles instead of action. That I should let her die because saving a king is only heroic if you're born into the right bloodline. Torvin said nothing. Smart man. Rhaegor looked down at the girl. Her face was slack, pale, dying. She'd moved without thinking, without hesitation. Seen danger and stepped into it because her body knew what her mind hadn't processed yet. That kind of instinct wasn't trained. It was born, carved into the marrow. Wolves didn't move like that unless they were protecting something. Unless they were bonded. The realization hit him like cold water. Get me a healer. Now. And if she dies because you were busy explaining protocols, I'll bury you in the same grave. Torvin ran. Dicket. The throne room had not been built for comfort. It had been built to remind everyone who walked through its doors that Stormhaven did not negotiate. Its ceilings stretched up into darkness, punctuated by iron chandeliers. Its floors were black marble, shot through with veins of silver. And at its center, elevated on a dais carved from a single piece of obsidian, sat a throne that looked like it had been pulled from the heart of a mountain. Rhaegor sat in that throne now and hated every second of it. 3 hours since the assassination attempt. 3 hours since a girl nobody knew existed had bled out saving his life. 3 hours since he'd ordered his healers to treat a servant like she mattered. The court was restless. He could feel it, the way predators feel a shift in the wind before prey bolts. They stood in their designated positions along the walls, dressed in their house colors, faces arranged in careful neutrality. But their eyes moved, their shoulders tensed. They were waiting to see what he'd do, waiting to see if the king who ruled through strength and dominance would show weakness for a girl with gray eyes and no name. Chancellor Draven cleared his throat. The man was old, white-haired, thin in the way that came from a lifetime spent in libraries instead of training yards. But his mind was sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. He'd served Rhaegor's father, had helped rebuild the empire after the Blood Wars, was respected by every noble house in Stormhaven. Rhaegor didn't trust him for a second. Your Majesty. The healers report that the girl is stable. The arrow has been removed. She will live. The collective exhale in the room was almost imperceptible. Almost. Good. Rhaegor's voice carried. Flat. Final. See that she receives the best care available. Private chambers. Round-the-clock attention. Whatever she needs. Draven's expression didn't change. Of course, Your Majesty. However, there is the matter of compensation. Compensation. For her service. A reward, as it were. Perhaps a sum of gold. A recommendation to a better household. No. Draven blinked. Your Majesty, she doesn't need gold. She needs protection. The room went still, the kind of still that preceded violence. Rhaegor leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes on Draven. Someone tried to kill me today. Used an arrow that doesn't match any house colors. Fired from a position that required access to the eastern wing. An area restricted to nobility and upper staff. Which means whoever wants me dead isn't some disgruntled peasant with a stolen bow. It's someone in this room. The silence that followed was deafening. He let it stretch. Let them sweat. Let them wonder if he already knew who it was. If he was watching them specifically. If their names were already written on a list somewhere in his private chambers. That girl saved my life. Which makes her a witness, a liability. And if I'm smart, a tool. Because whoever planned this will want her silenced. And when they come for her, and they will come for her, I'll be waiting. Draven's hands were clasped behind his back. His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, maybe. Or concern. A sound strategy, Your Majesty. Shall I arrange additional guards for her chambers? No. Rhaegor stood. The movement was fluid, predatory. She stays in the royal wing, near my quarters, under my protection. The murmur that rippled through the court was immediate, low, shocked. Lady Severine stepped forward. She was young for a council member, mid-30s, beautiful in the way that required maintenance and money. Her house controlled the southern trade routes, made her indispensable, made her bold. Your Majesty, surely you don't mean to suggest— I don't suggest, I declare. That girl is under my personal protection until further notice. Anyone who approaches her without authorization answers to me. Anyone who harms her dies. Lady Severine's smile was sharp. Of course, Your Majesty, though I wonder, what if the girl herself is complicit? What if this was staged to gain your favor? The room went cold. Rhaegor descended the dais, slowly, each step deliberate. He stopped 3 feet from Lady Severine, close enough to smell her perfume, close enough to see the pulse jumping in her throat. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the throne room. Are you suggesting that a servant girl orchestrated an assassination attempt against the most powerful alpha in the Empire, took an arrow through her own shoulder, and bled half to death on my floor, for the chance to sleep in a nicer bed? Lady Severine's smile faltered. Because if that's your theory, I'm curious how stupid you think I am. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Your Majesty, I merely meant— You meant to undermine my decision, to question my judgment, to suggest that my protection is something easily manipulated by a dying girl who couldn't speak if she tried. Something in those words landed wrong. He felt it immediately. A ripple of recognition from the nobles closest to him. A knowing look exchanged between 2 council members. Couldn't speak if she tried. How did they know that? Rhaegor's eyes narrowed. His focus shifted from Lady Severine to the faces around the room, reading them, hunting. Chancellor Draven stepped forward. His voice was smooth, diplomatic. Your Majesty, I believe what Lady Severine meant to convey is simply concern for your safety. These are uncertain times. Trust is a commodity in short supply. Rhaegor didn't look at him, didn't break his scan of the room. Then everyone should be very careful about how they spend it. He turned, walked back to his throne, sat. This court is dismissed. I want a full investigation into today's events. Every servant who had access to the Eastern Wing, every guard on rotation, every noble who left their chambers between noon and evening. I want names, movements, witnesses, and I want it yesterday. Torvin stepped forward. At once, Your Majesty. One more thing. The room held its breath. The girl's name. Someone must know it. Find out. Bring it to me before nightfall. Draven's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Rhaegor to see it. The old man knew something. The royal wing was silent in the way that expensive places always were. Thick carpets that swallowed footsteps. Heavy doors that sealed tight. Servants who knew better than to breathe too loud. Rhaegor walked its corridors alone. His guards wanted to follow. He'd ordered them to stay back. 50 feet minimum. Close enough to respond to a threat. Far enough that he could think without their presence pressing against his spine. He needed to think. Someone had tried to kill him. That wasn't new. 6 attempts in the last 3 years. 7 if you counted the poisoned wine that his taster caught before it reached his lips. Being king meant being a target. Expected. Manageable. But this was different. The arrow had been meant to kill. No poison, no theatrics. Just a clean shot from a skilled archer who knew exactly where to aim. Someone professional. Someone expensive. Someone with access. And in saving him, a voiceless servant girl had disrupted a plan months in the making. He reached her door. 2 guards stood outside. Both wolves. Both loyal. Both under strict orders not to let anyone pass. Status. The taller one, Marcus, scarred jaw, competent fighter, straightened. Stable, Your Majesty, sleeping. Healers say she'll wake by morning. Good. I'm going in. Your Majesty, the healers advised. I don't pay healers to give me orders. I pay them to keep people alive. She alive? Yes, sire. Then they did their job. He pushed the door open. The room was smaller than his own chambers, but still luxurious by any standard. Silk curtains. Polished wood furniture. A bed large enough for 2 people who liked space, and in that bed, barely making an impression in the blankets, was the girl. She looked even smaller here, even more breakable. Her shoulder was bandaged, pristine white wrappings that stood out stark against her skin. Her breathing was even, shallow, but steady. Her face was turned toward the window where moonlight cut across the floor in silver bands. Rhaegor closed the door behind him. The room smelled like herbs and healing salves. Underneath that, something else. Something familiar that he couldn't quite place. It bothered him, made his instincts twitch. He moved to the chair beside her bed. Sat. The wood creaked under his weight. Up close, he could see details he'd missed before. A scar along her jaw, small, old, healed badly. Another on her forearm, burn mark maybe. Her hands were calloused, fingernails short and practical. The hands of someone who worked. But her face was wrong. Not disfigured, not ugly, just wrong. Like a painting where the proportions were slightly off. He'd seen thousands of faces in his life. Could read nobility in a cheekbone. Read lineage in the set of someone's eyes. This girl's face read like a word in a language he didn't speak. Who are you? She didn't answer. Unconscious people rarely did. He leaned back, let his head rest against the chair, closed his eyes. The bond tugged at him, faint, uncertain. But there, he'd felt it the moment she dropped. That primal recognition that happened when two wolves acknowledged each other on a level below conscious thought. It wasn't attraction, wasn't lust. It was older than that, deeper. It was the thing that made wolves into packs instead of individuals. And she'd felt it too. Had to have. Her body had moved before her mind caught up, had thrown itself between him and death because every instinct she possessed screamed, protect. You don't protect a stranger like that. Not unless something fundamental in your wiring recognizes them as yours. The door opened behind him. Rhaegor's hand was on his blade before the intruder finished crossing the threshold. He was halfway to standing when Torvin's familiar scent registered. It's me, sire. Just me. Rhaegor settled back. Barely. You have news, the girl's name. Took some digging. Nobody seemed to remember assigning her. No official records in the servant logs. But one of the older kitchen staff recognized her. And? Torvin's face was strange, uncomfortable. Said she's been here about 6 years, works mostly nights, keeps to herself, doesn't speak. Mute? Don't know. Could be something else. But here's the thing, Torvin stepped further into the room. Lowered his voice, even though only the 3 of them were there, and one was unconscious. The kitchen worker said the girl never gives her name. But one of the other servants started calling her Willa. Said it just fit. Willa. Rhaegor tested the name, felt the shape of it. It didn't tell him anything, didn't unlock any memories, didn't explain why his instincts were screaming that something about this girl mattered. Anything else? Torvin hesitated. That never meant good things. Spit it out. There's a rumor. Old one. Kitchen gossip mostly. Probably nothing. Tell me anyway. Some of the older staff think she might be connected to a noble house. Something about the way she moves, the way she holds herself when she thinks nobody's watching, like she was trained for something better. Which house? Don't know. Could be nothing. Could be someone's imagination running wild. Or it could be exactly what someone wants hidden. Rhaegor stood, moved to the window. Stormhaven spread out below him, city lights like scattered stars. His empire. His responsibility, his prison. Double the investigation. I want to know everything about this girl. Where she came from, who brought her here, why nobody has records of her employment. And I want to know who's been paying attention to her. Paying attention? Someone knows her. Someone made sure she stayed invisible. You don't erase a person that thoroughly by accident. That takes effort, resources, authority. You think someone planted her here? I think someone tried to kill me and she got in the way. And I think the panic I saw in Draven's eyes when I asked for her name means he knows more than he's saying. Torvin's jaw tightened. Want me to bring him in for questioning? Not yet. Right now he thinks he's careful. Let him stay careful. Careful people make mistakes when they rush. The girl, Willa, stirred in her sleep. A small sound, almost a whimper. Her hand twitched toward her shoulder, stopped by the bandages. Rhaegor turned back to her. Watched the moonlight paint her face in silver and shadow. Find out everything. And Torvin? Sire? Nobody gets close to her. Not healers without my approval, not servants with food, not council members with concerns. She breathes because I allow it. And anyone who threatens that finds out what happens when you make an enemy of a king. Understood. Torvin left. The room fell silent again. Rhaegor moved back to the chair, sat, his eyes on Willa's face. She looked peaceful, younger in sleep, vulnerable in a way that made something uncomfortable shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to protective. He'd spent his life learning to be a king, learning to rule through strength and dominance, learning that mercy was weakness and attachment was a blade your enemies would use to gut you. But sitting here, watching this girl breathe, he felt something older than kingship stirring, something that said she was his to protect. And anyone who tried to take her would learn why wolves were apex predators. Morning came with blood. Rhaegor woke to shouting, not the controlled barking of guards drilling, not the organized chaos of shift changes, real shouting, the kind that preceded violence. He was on his feet and armed before his eyes fully opened. Instinct, training, 10 years as king and 20 before that learning how to survive. The door to Willa's room burst inward. Marcus stumbled through it, the guard who'd been on watch. His throat was open, arterial spray painting the walls crimson. He hit the floor and didn't get up. Behind him, 3 figures in black. Assassins. Rhaegor moved. The first one died before realizing the king was awake. Rhaegor's blade took him through the ribs, angled up into the heart. Quick, professional, silent. The second one was faster. Got a knife up in time to deflect the killing blow. They traded strikes. 3, 4. The assassin was good. Trained. Disciplined. Not good enough. Rhaegor caught his wrist, twisted, felt bones snap, used the momentum to drive his blade through the man's throat, pulled it free and turned in the same motion. The third assassin wasn't coming for him. She was going for Willa. Female. Smaller. Faster. Already halfway across the room with a blade angled for Willa's exposed throat. Rhaegor threw his sword. It wasn't graceful, wasn't precise, but it was fast and it was heavy, and when 200 pounds of steel and momentum hit the assassin between the shoulders, she went down hard. He was on her before she could recover. Knee in her spine, hand fisted in her hair, yanking her head back at an angle that made her gasp. "Who sent you?" She laughed, blood in her teeth, eyes bright with something between pain and ecstasy. "You already know." Rhaegor pulled harder, her vertebrae creaked. "Names." The assassin's smile widened. "They said you'd protect her. Said you'd bonded. Didn't believe it. An alpha like you bonded to a broken little thing like her? Thought it was a joke." Her voice was fading, spine about to snap. "Who sent you?" But she was already gone. Not dead. That would take another 3 seconds. Just gone. Eyes unfocused, smile fixed. Whatever fanaticism drove someone to die for a cause had taken over. Rhaegor let her drop, stood. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. They'd come for her, while he slept 10 feet away, while guards stood outside. They'd killed Marcus and come for Willa because she was vulnerable, and they were professionals, and this was the window. He turned. Willa was awake. Her eyes were open, wide, gray as winter storms. She was staring at him, at the blood on his hands, at the bodies on her floor, at the sword he'd thrown with enough force to shatter ribs. She should have been screaming, should have been in shock, should have been anything except what she was. Calm. Her breathing was steady, her hands weren't shaking. She looked at him the way someone looks at a puzzle they're trying to solve. Then she tried to speak. Her lips moved, her throat worked, but no sound came out. Not a whisper, not a rasp, nothing. Something inside Rhaegor's chest cracked. She was mute. Not by choice, not by injury. He could see the shape of words in her mouth, the intent in her eyes. This was something else, something done to her, something that made his instinct scream wrong. The door burst open again, Torvin this time, with a dozen guards. They flooded the room, secured the perimeter, started checking bodies. Rhaegor didn't move, didn't break eye contact with Willa. "Get Chancellor Draven, now!" Torvin looked at the bodies, at Marcus's corpse, at the blood spreading across expensive carpet. "Sire, we need to—" I said now. The tone brooked no argument. Torvin ran. Rhaegor moved to Willa's bedside, slowly. The way you approach a wounded animal. She watched him come, didn't flinch, didn't shy away. He knelt, brought his eyes level with hers. They'll come again. Whoever wants me dead, they want you dead now too. Because you saw something, or because you matter in ways neither of us understand yet. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. But I meant what I said. You're under my protection, and I don't let anyone take what's mine. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the betrayal that everyone learned to expect. She wouldn't find it. He might be a king, might be a predator, might be a dozen things people feared, but he didn't abandon Pack. And somehow, impossibly, against all logic and reason, this silent, broken girl with gray eyes and no name had become exactly that. His. Chancellor Draven arrived pale and breathless, the kind of pale that came from genuine shock, not guilt, the kind of breathless that meant he'd run the entire way. Good. That meant he might still be salvageable. Rhaegor stood in the blood-soaked room and watched the old man take in the scene. 3 dead assassins, 1 dead guard, walls painted in arterial spray, and in the center of it all, a king covered in gore and a girl who shouldn't have survived the night. Explain. Draven's throat worked. Your Majesty, everything. Now. Starting with why you recognized this girl's name before I asked for it. The Chancellor's hands were shaking, a tell. Fear, probably. Or realization that lying would get him killed in the next 30 seconds. His eyes went to Willa, lingered there. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or guilt. Her name isn't Willa. The room went silent except for guards breathing and Torvin's hand tightening on his sword hilt. Rhaegor's voice came out soft. Dangerous. Then what is it? Draven closed his eyes, opened them. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. It's Willa Silvercrest. The name hit Rhaegor like cold water. Silvercrest, one of the old bloodlines. Nobility so ancient their lineage predated the empire itself. Powerful, wealthy, influential, extinct. The Silvercrests were massacred 8 years ago. Every member of the bloodline, men, women, children. Their estate burned, their name erased. It had been presented as retaliation for treason, evidence of a plot to overthrow his father. The execution had been public, brutal, final. There were no survivors, except apparently there was. Rhaegor's eyes went to Willa, to the girl in the bed who'd been invisible for 6 years, who'd saved his life without hesitation, who looked at him now with those gray eyes that suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. Silvercrest eyes, the bloodline trait. Gray as winter storms, unmistakable once you knew what you were looking for. You've known she was here, this whole time. Draven's silence was answer enough. Rhaegor moved fast. His hand closed around Draven's throat, lifted. The old man's feet left the floor. Guards moved forward, uncertain. Torvin held up a hand. Wait. Give me one reason not to kill you where you stand. Draven choked, gasped. His hand scrabbled at Rhaegor's wrist. She was a child when they murdered her family on charges of treason, charges you helped fabricate. No. The word was strangled. Real. I tried to save her. By stripping her identity and burying her in servitude? By keeping her alive. Rhaegor dropped him. Draven crumpled, coughed, wheezed. The king's voice was ice. Talk. All of it. Now. And in that blood-soaked room, with the bodies of assassins cooling on the floor, and a girl who should have been dead 8 years ago watching from her bed, Chancellor Draven began to speak. And the truth he revealed would shatter everything Rhaegor thought he knew about his father's reign, about justice, and about the girl whose life had just become the most dangerous secret in the Empire. Draven's voice came out hoarse, broken, like something fundamental inside him had finally given way under pressure it was never meant to bear. Your father didn't order the Silvercrest massacre because of treason. He ordered it because they knew too much. Rhaegor didn't move, didn't blink. His stillness was the kind that preceded eruptions, the kind that made smart men reconsider their next words very carefully. Knew what? The old man's hands trembled. He pressed them flat against his thighs, tried to stop the shaking, failed. About the magic, the forbidden kind. Blood magic. The kind that's been outlawed for 3 generations because it corrupts everything it touches. Magic. The word tasted like ash in Rhaegor's mouth. Magic was myth, superstition, stories old women told to scare children into obedience. It didn't exist, couldn't exist. The world ran on strength and steel and the dominance hierarchies carved into wolf DNA, not fairy tales. But Draven's face said otherwise. Your father was dying, cancer, eating him from the inside out. 6 months, maybe less. The healers tried everything. Nothing worked. So he went looking for alternatives. Found people who promised they could extend his life. People who dealt in old knowledge, dark knowledge. The Silvercrest found out. They had scholars, researchers, people who studied the old texts. They discovered what your father was doing, discovered the price. What price? Draven's eyes went to Willa, stayed there. Blood magic requires sacrifice. Not coin, not allegiance. Life. Young life. Children, usually. The younger, the more potent. Your father's people were collecting them. Orphans, street kids, anyone who wouldn't be missed. The Silvercrest traced the disappearances back to the palace. The room felt colder, smaller, like the walls were contracting. And when they confronted him, they didn't confront. They tried to expose him, quietly, through the right channels. They thought justice would prevail, thought evidence mattered. Rhaegor's laugh came out sharp, bitter. They were nobility, should have known better. They were idealists, believed the empire was built on law, not power. Your father proved them wrong, fabricated treason charges, had them executed before they could speak publicly, burned their estate, erased their bloodline, except he didn't. Because that girl is still breathing. Draven's throat worked. She was supposed to die with the others. But someone in your father's inner circle had a conscience. Not enough to stop the massacre, just enough to pull one child out before the flames took her. They brought her to me, begged me to hide her. Why you? Because I'd tried to talk your father out of it. Argued against the executions. Lost that argument. But it meant someone thought I might be willing to commit a smaller treason to ease a larger guilt. Were they right? The silence stretched. Draven's eyes were wet. Yes. So you took a girl from one of the oldest bloodlines in the Empire, stripped her identity, and buried her in kitchen work for 6 years. Kept her close to the family that murdered everyone she loved. Made her serve the people who stole everything from her. I kept her alive. Rhaegor moved, fast. His hand cracked across Draven's face hard enough to split his lip. The old man's head snapped to the side. Blood welled. He didn't raise a hand to defend himself. Didn't flinch. You kept her prisoner. Called it mercy. Made her invisible so she couldn't speak. Made her nobody so she couldn't fight back. She can't speak because they took her voice. The people who did your father's work, they used magic to silence her, to make sure she could never tell what she'd seen, what she knew. The words hung in the air like poisoned gas. Rhaegor's eyes went to Willa. She was sitting up now, back against the headboard, hands folded in her lap, watching them both with those gray eyes that had seen her entire world burn and somehow survived. She looked small, fragile, breakable. But there was something in the set of her jaw, the way she held herself, something that said nobility didn't come from titles. It came from spine, from refusing to break even when breaking would be easier. His voice came out quiet. They silenced her with magic. Draven nodded. Blood dripped from his lip onto his robes. I don't know who. Don't know how. Just know it happened. One day she could speak. The next, nothing. Not a sound. Not even a whisper. Can it be undone? I don't know. Then find someone who does. The Chancellor's face went pale. Your Majesty, blood magic practitioners aren't exactly easy to locate. They operate in shadow, underground. The penalty for even consulting with one is, I don't care about penalties. I care about answers. She took an arrow for me. Someone tried to kill her in her sleep because she's a liability. And now you're telling me she's the last surviving witness to my father's crimes. Which means she matters, which means I need her able to testify. And if she can't, then I'll find another way. But we start with undoing what was done to her. Understanding what happens when you tear down foundations that powerful men built on lies. That's not investigation, that's war. Rhaegor smiled. It was not a kind expression. Then it's a good thing I'm very good at war. Torvin cleared his throat. Subtle. Careful. The kind of interruption that could get a man killed if timed wrong. Sire, the bodies, we need to move them, and the council will have heard about the attack by now. They'll want answers. Let them want. Rhaegor turned to his captain. I want a full lockdown. Nobody enters or leaves the palace without my personal authorization. I want the eastern wing sealed. I want every servant, guard, and noble who had access to this corridor in the last 24 hours questioned. And I want to know how 3 assassins got past my security. Already started. We've got 2 servants and 1 guard unaccounted for. Running a sweep now. Good. And Torven? Find me someone who knows about blood magic. I don't care where you have to look. Don't care what rocks you have to turn over. Find them. Bring them here. Understood. The captain left. His men went with him, carrying bodies wrapped in sheets. In minutes, the room was clear, just Rhaegor, Draven, and Willa. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Rhaegor looked at the chancellor, studied him. Old man, loyal servant, keeper of ugly secrets, trying to balance conscience against survival. How many others know? About her? Maybe 3. Maybe fewer now. Most of them are dead or disappeared. Your father made sure of that, and the ones still breathing are either ignorant or too scared to speak. The kind of secret that gets you killed if you whisper it wrong. Then here's what happens next. You're going to compile everything, every document, every name, every piece of evidence that connects my father to blood magic and the Silvercrest massacre. You're going to give it to me. All of it. No redactions, no omissions. Your Majesty, some of those documents implicate... I don't care who they implicate. My father's dead. His sins are history. But if his people are still operating, still using forbidden magic, still murdering children for power, then they're my problem now. And I deal with my problems. Draven's face was ashen. This will destroy reputations, bring down houses, destabilize the empire? Maybe. But an empire built on child sacrifice and blood magic deserves to fall. We'll build something better from the ruins. And if you can't, then I'll die trying, which is still better than living as the king who knew and did nothing. The old man nodded slowly. Acceptance. Or resignation. Hard to tell which. I'll have the documents compiled by tomorrow. Tonight. You'll have them compiled tonight, because whoever sent those assassins knows their window is closing, knows I'm asking questions. And scared people make desperate moves. Understood. Droven stood. Moved toward the door. Paused. Your Majesty. For what it's worth, your father loved you. Everything he did, every dark thing, he did it believing he was protecting the Empire. Protecting you. Rhaegor's voice was ice. Then he should have protected the innocent instead of his own legacy. Love doesn't justify atrocity. It just makes it more tragic. The Chancellor left. The door closed. And for the first time since the attack, Rhaegor was alone with Willa. He moved to the chair beside her bed. Sat heavily, let his head fall back. His hands were still shaking. Not from fear, from the weight of everything Draven had just unloaded onto his shoulders. His father had been a monster, had ordered children killed to extend his own life, had massacred an entire bloodline to cover his crimes, had used magic so forbidden even speaking of it was taboo, and Rhaegor had spent 10 years believing he was honoring a good man's legacy. The betrayal of it burned worse than any blade. A touch on his hand made him open his eyes. Willa had reached out. Her fingers were light against his knuckles. Barely there. But the intent was clear. She was trying to comfort him. A girl who'd lost everything. Who'd been silenced and hidden and forced to serve the family that destroyed hers. Who'd taken an arrow for him without hesitation. Who'd survived 2 assassination attempts in as many days. She was trying to comfort him. Something in his chest cracked. He turned his hand over. Palm up. Let her fingers settle against his. They were small, calloused, warm. I'm sorry. His voice came out rough, unpracticed at apology. For what my father did. For what was done to you. For every day you spent invisible because showing your face would have gotten you killed. She squeezed his hand. Once. Gentle. Her eyes were steady. Not forgiving, not condemning, just present. Seeing him. really seeing him in a way that made him feel exposed and understood all at once. He'd been king for 10 years, had commanded armies, had made decisions that shaped the fate of thousands, had learned to read people like texts, to see their angles, their weaknesses, their lies. But sitting here, holding the hand of a mute girl who should have been dead, he felt like he understood nothing at all. The bond between them pulled, insistent, primal. It wasn't gentle, wasn't comfortable. It was the kind of connection that demanded recognition, that said you are mine and I am yours, and that's not negotiable. He'd felt attraction before, lust, even affection. This was different. This was fundamental, like someone had reached into his chest and tied a rope around something vital, and the other end was tied to her. Bonded. The word should have terrified him. Bonds were liabilities, weaknesses enemies could exploit. Every manual on leadership said the same thing. Attachments make you vulnerable, make you hesitate, make you choose personal feelings over strategic necessity. But sitting here, he couldn't bring himself to care. Let them come. Let them try to use her against him. They'd learn what happened when you threatened what an alpha claimed as his. They'd learn it the hard way. Willa's eyes shifted, focused on something behind him. Her hand tensed in his. Rhaegor turned. A shadow moved in the corner. Too fast to be natural, too fluid to be human. He was on his feet and armed before his conscious mind processed the threat. Blade out. Body between Willa and whatever had just manifested in her room. The shadow solidified, took shape, became a figure in dark robes with a hood pulled low. Tall. Thin. Hands hidden in sleeves. My guards didn't announce you, which means you didn't come through the door, which means you're about to tell me exactly what you are and why I shouldn't kill you where you stand. The figure's voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It sounded like wind through dead trees, like whispers in empty rooms. I am the answer to the question you haven't asked yet, the solution to the problem you just inherited. And if you kill me, the girl will never speak again. Rhaegor's blade didn't waver. Lot of bold claims for someone who just broke into the royal wing. The figure moved, glided, really, crossed the room like gravity was optional, stopped 5 feet from Willa's bed, close enough to see, far enough that Rhaegor could intercept if needed. The hood tilted, examining Willa. The work is old, cruel, elegant in its brutality. Blood magic, yes, but refined. Whoever bound her voice knew exactly what they were doing. Can you undo it? Perhaps. For a price. Of course. Rhaegor's grip on his blade tightened. Everyone wants something. Name it. Protection. Sanctuary. A place to practice my craft without persecution. Your father's people spent a decade hunting practitioners like me, killing us, burning our texts, erasing knowledge that predates your empire by centuries. I offer you my services. You offer me a chance to survive. And if I refuse, then the girl remains silent. The conspiracy continues. And you spend the rest of your reign wondering who in your court is still practicing the same magic that killed children for power. The figure paused. Your choice, King. It wasn't really a choice. Not with Willa's eyes on him. Not with the bond screaming that she mattered more than pride or principle or political optics. Fine. You get your sanctuary. But the second I find out you're using your craft for anything resembling what my father's people did, I'll kill you myself, slowly. Understood. The figure moved closer to Willa, raised one pale hand. This will hurt. Not physically, but the magic bound to her has roots. Tearing it out will feel like tearing out part of herself. She needs to understand that. Rhaegor looked at Willa. Her eyes were wide, uncertain. But there was no fear there, just determination. The same look she'd had right before stepping between him and an arrow. She nodded. The practitioner placed fingers against Willa's throat. The touch was light, almost reverent. Then they began to speak. The words weren't in any language Rhaegor recognized. They felt old, heavy, like sounds that predated speech. The air in the room grew thick, oppressive. His instincts screamed danger, but he didn't move, didn't interfere. Willa's back arched. Her mouth opened in a scream that had no sound. Her hands clawed at the sheets. Muscles stood out in her neck. Her eyes rolled back. Rhaegor moved forward. Instinct. The practitioner's free hand came up, stopping him without touching. Don't. Interference now will kill her. So he stood there, helpless, watching Willa convulse silently, watching her suffer. Every instinct he possessed screamed to intervene, to stop this, to protect. But sometimes protection meant allowing pain, meant trusting that the temporary agony would lead to something better. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Minutes passed. Hours. Time became meaningless. The practitioner's words continued. Unbroken. Relentless. And Willa kept screaming without sound. Then something in the air shifted. Snapped. Like a rope pulled too tight, finally giving way. Willa collapsed back against the pillows, gasping, shaking. Her throat was red, raw, like she'd been screaming for days. The practitioner stepped back, lowered their hood. The face underneath was neither beautiful nor hideous, just other, ageless, marked with symbols that moved across skin like living things. It's done. The binding is broken. Her voice will return. Slowly at first. Give it time. Rhaegor moved to Willa's side, took her hand. She squeezed back, hard. Her breathing was ragged but steady. He looked at the practitioner. You have your sanctuary, my word on it. But I want information, everything you know about blood magic. Who practices it? How to identify it? How to stop it? All of that. In time. But first, King, you should know something. What? The magic used to silence her? It's still active in this palace. I can feel it. Threads of it woven through the foundations, through the walls. Someone here is maintaining old workings, old rituals. Your father's people aren't finished. They're just waiting. Pipsig. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of morning that felt like a threat. Rhaegor stood at the window of his private study. He hadn't slept, hadn't tried. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford when his entire worldview had collapsed overnight. Behind him, documents covered every surface. Draven had delivered as promised, boxes of them, files, ledgers, testimony, confession. 8 years of carefully hidden atrocities laid bare in ink and paper. He'd read them all, wished he hadn't. The scope of his father's crimes was staggering. 37 children confirmed dead, twice that number missing, presumed dead. Payments to practitioners, instructions for rituals, correspondence with nobles who'd participated, profited. Some of those nobles still served on his council, still walked his halls, still smiled at him during court sessions, and called him Majesty while hiding blood under their fingernails. The door opened. Torvin entered without knocking, privilege of rank and friendship that dated back to childhood. The captain looked exhausted, gray circles under his eyes, jaw tight. Report. Found the missing servants, dead. Dumped in the incinerator chute, throats cut. Professional work. And the guard? Also dead. But that one's interesting. He was killed with his own blade, from behind. Suggests he knew his attacker, trusted them enough to turn his back. Inside job. Has to be. The assassins had perfect intel. Knew shift rotations, knew which rooms were occupied, knew exactly when to strike. Rhaegor turned from the window. How many people have that level of access? To your schedule and the servant quarters? Maybe 20. Council members, senior staff, high-ranking guards? Narrow it down. Who benefited from my father's blood magic operation? Who was close enough to know about it? Who has the resources to hire professional killers? Torvin pulled out a list. Already started. Based on the documents Draven provided, I've got 7 names. All council members or advisors, all connected to the old regime. The door opened again. No knock, just opening. Lady Severine swept in like she owned the room. She was dressed for court. Emerald silk, gold jewelry, hair perfect, face arranged in carefully calibrated concern. Your Majesty, I heard about the attack. How dreadful. Is the poor girl all right? Rhaegor's expression didn't change. She's alive. No thanks to whoever coordinated 3 assassins into the royal wing. Severine's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Then, I'm sure the investigation will uncover the truth. These things always do. Do they? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like someone with intimate knowledge of palace security orchestrated an attack on a girl who happens to be the last surviving member of a bloodline my father erased. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Severine's smile didn't falter, but something behind her eyes went cold. Calculating. The Silvercrests were traitors, Your Majesty. The evidence was quite clear. Was it? Or was it fabricated to cover up something worse? I don't understand. Don't you? Because I've spent the night reading very interesting documents. Documents that detail exactly what my father was doing before the Silvercrests discovered it. Documents that name names, show payments, prove conspiracy. Your Majesty, whatever you think you've found, I know what I've found. The question is how many of my council members are implicated. Severine's jaw tightened, barely visible. But there, you're treading dangerous ground. Am I? Or am I finally standing on solid footing after 10 years of walking on lies? This empire is built on child sacrifice and blood magic, which makes it hollow, rotten, overdue for collapse. You'd destroy everything your father built. My father built nothing. He stole, murdered, used forbidden magic to extend his own life at the cost of innocence. That's not building, that's butchery. And you think you can do better? You think you can tear down the power structures that have kept this empire stable for decades and not face rebellion? I think I can do what my father didn't. Tell the truth, face consequences, build something that doesn't require children's blood to function. Idealism. Severine's voice dripped contempt. You sound like the Silvercrests. Look what happened to them. They were murdered. By people who valued power over morality. People who are still walking these halls, still making decisions, still believing they can operate in shadow forever. Rhaegor stepped closer. Severine held her ground, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight shift of weight that preceded flight or fight. Here's what happens next. Every council member connected to my father's operations is going to answer questions. Under oath, in front of witnesses. They will account for their actions, their knowledge, their complicity. And if they refuse, then I'll assume guilt and act accordingly. You're talking about executing nobility without trial. I'm talking about trials. Public ones. With evidence and testimony and due process. Everything the Silvercrest didn't get. Everything they deserved. Severine's eyes narrowed. You're protecting her. The girl. That's what this is about. I'm protecting the truth. She just happens to be part of it. She's a liability. A symbol of your father's greatest mistake. Keeping her alive makes you vulnerable. Then I'll be vulnerable. But I'll be honest. Honesty won't save you when the knives come out. Good thing I'm very hard to kill. Severine smiled. It was not friendly. We'll see, Your Majesty. We'll see. She left. The door closed with a soft click that somehow felt more threatening than a slam. Torvin exhaled, loudly. Well, that was subtle. She's scared. Scared people get desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. You think she's involved? I think everyone's involved until proven otherwise. Rhaegor moved to his desk. Sat, the weight of everything pressed down on his shoulders like physical force. Get me a full accounting, assets, holdings, communications, everyone on that list. I want to know who they talk to, who they pay, who owes them favors. On it. And Torvin? Double the guard on Willa. Nobody gets close without me knowing. Not healers, not servants, not council members with concerns. She's the key to all of this. The one person who saw what happened. The one witness they couldn't silence permanently. Understood. The captain paused. Sire, if you go through with this, if you really expose what your father did, it'll tear the empire apart. Then it deserves to be torn apart. Better to rebuild on truth than continue pretending the foundation isn't made of corpses. 3 days later, Willa spoke. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't momentous. She was sitting in her room, sunlight streaming through windows, when Rhaegor entered with an update on the investigation. He was mid-sentence when she interrupted. Thank you. 2 words, barely a whisper. Her voice was rough, unused, like rusted machinery grinding back to life. But it was there. Rhaegor stopped talking, stared. She was looking at him with those gray eyes, a slight smile on her lips. Tentative. Testing. Say that again, thank you. Louder this time, more confident, for not letting me die, for finding the truth. Her throat worked, for caring when nobody else did. He was across the room before he realized he'd moved, knelt beside her chair, took her hands in his. They were shaking. His, not hers. How long have you been able to speak? Since yesterday. Wanted to make sure it was real, that it wouldn't just disappear again. Tell me everything. Everything you remember, everything you saw, everything they did, and she did. For 2 hours, Willa spoke. Told him about the night the soldiers came, about watching her family die, about being pulled from the flames by a guard she never saw again, about Draven hiding her, stripping her identity, binding her voice with magic so brutal it felt like swallowing broken glass, about years of servitude, of watching nobles who'd participated in her family's murder walk past her like she was furniture, of hearing them laugh, plan, conspire, about how she'd learned to listen, to observe, to remember every detail because someday, somehow, she'd promised herself she'd make them answer. And then about seeing Rhaegor, about recognizing the difference between the man and his father's legacy, about the moment she'd felt the bond snap into place. Primal, undeniable, about stepping between him and death because her body moved before her mind could question. When she finished, her voice was raw, exhausted. Rhaegor hadn't moved, hadn't interrupted, just listened. Now he spoke, voice low, dangerous. Names. I need names. She gave them. 7 in total. Council members. All powerful. All connected. All complicit. 3 of them matched the names on Torvin's list. The others were new. Rhaegor stood, moved to the window, stared out at his empire, his responsibility, his inheritance of blood and lies. When he spoke, his voice was absolutely calm. The kind of calm that preceded catastrophic violence. I'm going to destroy them. Every single one. Not quickly. Not quietly. Publicly. Thoroughly. I'm going to drag every secret into daylight and let it burn. And if it destabilizes the Empire, Willa stood, moved beside him. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, insubstantial. Then you'll build something better from the ashes, something that doesn't require my silence to function. They'll fight back. They'll use everything they have. Wealth, influence, power. Let them. He turned to her, really looked at her. This girl who'd survived impossible things, who'd kept silent for 6 years because speaking would have gotten her killed, who'd saved his life and refused to break even when breaking would have been easier. The bond between them pulled, insistent, demanding recognition. He'd spent his life believing attachment was weakness, that caring made you vulnerable, that a king who loved was a king who could be controlled. But standing here looking at Willa, he understood something fundamental. Strength wasn't isolation, wasn't dominance without connection. Real strength was choosing to protect something even when that choice put you at risk, was caring enough to fight impossible battles because the alternative was accepting injustice. His father had been strong in all the wrong ways, had believed power justified everything, had built an empire on atrocity and called it legacy. Rhaegor would be different, would be better, had to be. He reached out, cupped Willa's face. She leaned into the touch, trust, complete, terrifying. I can't promise this ends well, can't promise we survive what comes next. The forces we're about to face are powerful, entrenched. They've survived generations by being ruthless. I know. And you're still willing to testify, to stand in front of the Empire and tell them everything. I've been silent for 6 years. Her voice was steel-wrapped in silk. I'm done being quiet. Then we do this. Together. We burn it all down and build something better. Together. The word hung between them. A promise. A threat to everyone who'd assumed she was broken and he was controllable. They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn. Now, the council convened 2 days later. Emergency session, mandatory attendance. Every noble house represented. Every advisor present. The throne room was packed. Rhaegor sat on his throne and watched them file in, read their faces, saw confusion, concern, calculation. Some of them knew something was wrong, could feel the shift in atmosphere, the tension. The smart ones looked scared. When everyone was assembled, he stood. The room fell silent. This empire was built on lies. His voice carried. Absolutely clear. My father, King Valdrin, committed atrocities in the name of power, used forbidden magic, orchestrated the murder of innocents, destroyed the Silvercrest bloodline to hide his crimes. The murmur that rippled through the court was immediate. Shocked. Disbelieving. He continued, I have evidence, documents, testimony, witnesses, everything needed to prove what happened. And more importantly, I know who helped him, who profited, who covered it up, who's still covering it up. The room went deathly quiet. 7 names, all connected, all guilty. Some of you are in this room right now. Chancellor Draven stepped forward, looked older, smaller, but determined. I can verify everything the king has said. I helped hide the truth, participated in the conspiracy through my silence. I'm prepared to testify under oath. The shock was palpable. Draven was respected, trusted. If he was admitting guilt, then the accusations were real. Lady Severine's voice cut through the silence. This is absurd. You're basing this on what? The word of a disgraced chancellor and whatever fabricated documents you've manufactured? Rhaegor smiled. No. I'm basing it on the testimony of someone who was there, someone who survived, someone you've all ignored for 6 years because you thought she couldn't speak. He gestured. The side door opened. Willa walked in. She was dressed simply. Gray dress. Hair down, no jewelry, nothing to distinguish her from any other servant. Except for her eyes. Those gray Silvercrest eyes that marked her bloodline as clearly as a banner. The recognition was instantaneous, rippled through the nobles like a shockwave. Some of them went pale. Others looked confused. The guilty ones looked terrified. Willa walked to the center of the room, stood there, slight, young, seemingly fragile. Then she spoke. My name is Willa Silvercrest. I am the last surviving member of my bloodline. I watched my family die. Watched this empire murder children to fuel blood magic. Watched nobles who should have protected the innocent profit from their deaths. And I remember everything. Her voice grew stronger, clearer. I remember faces, names, conversations, orders. I listened when you thought I couldn't hear, watched when you thought I couldn't see, remembered when you thought I couldn't speak. You were wrong. The room erupted, shouting, denial, accusations, chaos. Rhaegor let it continue for exactly 10 seconds. Then his voice cut through like a blade. Silence. Instant compliance. The kind that came from instinct, from recognizing apex predator authority. Here's what happens next. Formal investigation, public hearings, due process. Everyone named in the documents gets a chance to defend themselves, to present evidence, to prove innocence. But know this, I will not protect you, will not shield you, will not allow this empire to continue functioning on blood and lies. Truth comes first. Justice comes first. Everything else is negotiable. Lord Hadrian stepped forward. Older man. Respected house, voice shaking. Your Majesty, even if everything you say is true, exposing it will destroy us. Destroy the empire. Destroy everything we've built. Then we'll build something better. Something that doesn't require children's deaths. Something worth preserving. You're naive, idealistic. You'll tear us apart from the inside, maybe. Or maybe I'll prove that empires can survive truth, can evolve, can be better than their worst moments. And if you're wrong, then I'll die knowing I tried, which is still better than living as the king who knew and did nothing. Hadrian shook his head, looked at the other nobles. Some of them were nodding, agreeing. Others looked furious, betrayed. The fractures were already showing. Rhaegor could feel it, the empire splitting. Some would stand with him, some would fight, some would flee. It didn't matter. He'd made his choice. Had crossed the line that separated comfortable lies from uncomfortable truth. There was no going back now. He looked at Willa. She was watching him. Trust in her eyes. Faith that he'd see this through. That he wouldn't abandon her, wouldn't sacrifice her to preserve stability. The bond between them pulled. Strong. Unbreakable. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Let the empire burn if it had to. They'd build something better from the ashes. The first assassination attempt came during the night council session. Rhaegor was reviewing testimony transcripts when the blade whispered past his ear. Close enough to feel the air displacement. Close enough that if he'd leaned forward instead of back, it would have opened his throat. He rolled. Instinct. Training. The kind of reaction you don't think about because thinking takes too long. The assassin followed. Professional. Silent. Dressed in palace guard uniform that fit too well to be stolen. This wasn't an outsider. This was someone who belonged here. Someone with access. Torvin appeared from nowhere. His sword took the assassin through the chest before the man could recover. Clean kill. Efficient. But Rhaegor's eyes were already scanning the room, because one assassin meant distraction, meant the real threat was somewhere else. Willa. He was moving before conscious thought caught up. Out the door. Down corridors he could navigate blind, his heart hammering against his ribs in a rhythm that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with primal fear. The bond screamed, wrong, danger, threat. He hit Willa's door at full speed, shoulder first. The wood splintered, gave way. Inside, carnage. 2 guards down. Throats opened. Blood spreading across expensive carpet in patterns that looked almost artistic in the lamplight. And in the center of the room, Willa, backed against the wall, a figure in black advancing on her with a blade that gleamed wet. Rhaegor's roar shook the windows. The assassin turned, just enough, just long enough. Willa moved, fast, grabbed the oil lamp from the bedside table, threw it. The glass shattered against the assassin's face. Oil ignited. Sudden. Bright. The figure screamed, stumbled backward. Rhaegor was already there. His blade found kidney, lung, heart, 3 strikes. The assassin dropped. He was at Willa's side in 2 steps, hands on her shoulders, checking for wounds. Blood. Damage. Are you hurt? Her eyes were wide but clear. No. Your guards got between us, gave me time. Good guards. Dead now because they'd done their job. Because protecting the vulnerable meant absorbing violence meant for others. More footsteps. Torvin and 6 guards flooded the room, took positions, sealed exits. Torvin's face was grim. Sire, we've got 3 more incidents. Simultaneously. Guard barracks, council chambers, your private study. Coordinated attack. How many dead? 8 guards, 2 servants, Chancellor Draven. The world tilted, stopped, started again wrong. Draven. The old man who'd kept Willa alive, who'd finally chosen truth over comfortable lies, who'd stood before the council and admitted guilt. Dead. Where? His chambers. Poison, looks like. In his evening wine, he was compiling more evidence for tomorrow's hearings. Got halfway through his notes before it took him. Rhaegor's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. The notes. Where are they? Gone. Fire started right after. Destroyed everything. Convenient. Too convenient. This wasn't random violence. This was strategy. Surgical. Taking out key witnesses. Destroying evidence. Sending a message that said we can reach anyone, anywhere, anytime. The people he was investigating weren't backing down. They were escalating, and they were very good at this. Get every remaining witness into protective custody. I want them in the same wing, same corridor. Guards I personally trust rotating shifts. Nobody goes in or out without my authorization. Already moving on it. And I want the palace locked down. Nobody leaves. I don't care if they're nobility or servants. Everyone stays put until we identify who's orchestrating this. Sire, that's going to create problems. Some of the noble houses will see it as imprisonment. Then they can see it however they want from inside their rooms. I'm not giving anyone else a chance to disappear or destroy evidence. Torvin nodded. Signaled his men. They left in formation, professional, disciplined. Rhaegor turned back to Willa. She was shaking. Finally. The adrenaline wearing off. The reality settling in. He pulled her against his chest, felt her arms wrap around him. Tight, desperate. The kind of hold that said, I almost died and you almost lost me and we're both pretending to be stronger than we feel. They're not going to stop. Her voice was muffled against his shirt. They'll keep coming until one of us is dead. I know, so what do we do? The question hung there. Heavy. Impossible. Because the truth was, he didn't know. Didn't have a strategy for fighting an enemy embedded so deeply in his own structure that he couldn't tell ally from threat. For the first time in his life, Rhaegor felt something he'd never allowed himself to feel. Doubt. Ngek. The War Council convened at dawn. Mandatory attendance. Every house represented. Every advisor present except the ones currently dead or under guard. The throne room felt colder, emptier, like something fundamental had been carved out of it. Rhaegor stood before his throne, didn't sit. Sitting implied comfort, stability. He had neither. 8 dead in coordinated attacks, Chancellor Draven murdered, evidence destroyed, and every single person in this room is a suspect until proven otherwise. Lord Hadrian stepped forward. Your Majesty, surely you don't believe we're all complicit. I believe someone here is. Someone with enough authority to coordinate simultaneous strikes. Someone who knew where guards would be stationed, where witnesses were housed, where evidence was kept. That could be anyone on the council. Exactly. Which is why nobody leaves until we sort this out. The murmur that rippled through the assembly was immediate. Angry. Offended. Lady Severine's voice cut through. You can't hold nobility prisoner in their own palace. Watch me. Rhaegor's tone was flat. Final. You all stayed when I announced the investigation. Stayed when Willa testified. Stayed when I promised public hearings. Now people are dying and evidence is burning, and I'm supposed to believe it's coincidence? You're paranoid. I'm cautious. There's a difference. Paranoia assumes threats that don't exist. I'm responding to threats that killed 8 people last night. Lord Brennick stepped forward. Older man. Military background. Respected. Your Majesty, with respect, this approach will alienate every house that supported you. You're treating allies like enemies. I'm treating everyone like potential enemies until someone proves otherwise, because the alternative got Draven killed. The room fell silent. Even the ones who wanted to argue couldn't deny that logic. Rhaegor continued. Here's what happens next. Full interrogations. Everyone accounts for their movements last night. Everyone explains their connections to my father's operations. Everyone submits to questioning under truth serum if necessary. Truth serum. Lady Severine's laugh was sharp. You're going to drug nobility. I'm going to find out who's murdering my people. If that requires pharmaceutical assistance, so be it. This is tyranny. No, tyranny is murdering children for power. This is investigation. Don't confuse the two. Severine's face went cold, calculated. You're making enemies, Your Majesty. Powerful ones. Then they should have thought about that before they killed 8 people in my palace. He turned, gestured to Torvin. Begin the interrogations. Start with anyone who had motive, opportunity, connection to my father's inner circle. At once. The council members shifted, uncomfortable. Some looked genuinely confused. Others looked guilty. The smart ones looked resigned. And one of them looked satisfied. Rhaegor caught it. Just a flash. A slight smile on Lord Brennick's face. There and gone so fast, most people would have missed it. But Rhaegor didn't miss things. Not when his empire was bleeding. He filed it away. Kept his expression neutral. Dismissed the council with orders to remain available for questioning. When the room cleared, only Torvin remained. Brennick. Start with him. The captain's eyebrows rose. Military hero. Decorated veteran. Respected by every house. Which makes him perfect cover. Nobody suspects the Patriot. And that smile when I mentioned interrogations? That wasn't nervousness. That was someone who thinks they've already won. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Either way, I want to know where he was last night, who he talked to, what he knows. I'll bring him in. Carefully. If he is involved, he's dangerous, smart, connected. Don't give him reason to panic. Understood. Torvin left. Rhaegor stood alone in the throne room, stared at the seat his father had occupied. The throne that represented absolute authority, absolute power, absolute isolation. Because this was what ruling meant. Suspecting everyone, trusting no one, making decisions that turned allies into enemies and enemies into corpses. His father had understood that, had embraced it, had built an empire on fear and control and the willingness to sacrifice anything for stability. Rhaegor had thought he could be different, could rule with honor, could expose truth without destroying everything. He'd been naive. The door opened behind him. He turned, hand on blade, instinct. Willa stood in the entrance, dressed simply, hair pulled back, looking small and tired and somehow still standing despite everything that should have broken her. You shouldn't be here. It's not secure. Nowhere is secure. She walked toward him. Might as well be here with you. The guards, No, I slipped past them. We'll be embarrassed. We'll tighten security. She stopped in front of him. But I needed to see you, needed to know you're all right. I'm fine. You're lying. Her hand found his, squeezed. You're drowning and pretending you can breathe underwater. The observation landed like a fist. Because she was right. He was drowning. In conspiracy. In violence. In the impossible task of dismantling systems designed to resist dismantling. I don't know how to do this. The words came out rough, unpracticed at vulnerability. Don't know how to root out corruption without destroying the empire. Don't know who to trust, who's lying, who's going to be next. So stop trying to do it alone. I'm the king. This is my responsibility, and I'm the witness, the survivor, the one person they couldn't silence permanently. This is my fight too. It's too dangerous. Breathing is dangerous right now. She stepped closer. Look at me. He did. Those gray eyes held his, steady, unflinching. You saved me, protected me, gave me voice, stood against your own counsel to defend truth. You think I'm going to hide while you face this alone? I think you've survived too much to throw your life away. I'm not throwing it away. I'm using it for something that matters, for justice, for making sure what happened to my family doesn't happen to anyone else. The bond between them pulled, tight, insistent. It wasn't gentle, wasn't comforting. It was the kind of connection that demanded you acknowledge it. That said, we're in this together, whether it's convenient or not. Rhaegor cupped her face, rough hands gentle against soft skin. If something happens to you, then you'll tear the world apart. I know. She smiled, small, sad. But right now you need to focus on staying alive long enough to do the tearing. Sound advice. I'm occasionally useful that way. He almost laughed. Would have if the situation wasn't so desperate. Instead, he kissed her. Hard, brief. The kind of kiss that said, I claim you and you claim me, and that's not negotiable. When they broke apart, her eyes were bright, determined. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together. The word felt like a vow, like drawing a line in sand and daring the world to cross it. They had no idea how soon that dare would be answered. Sis. Lord Brennick's interrogation lasted 3 hours. Rhaegor watched from behind one-way glass while Torven conducted the questioning. Standard procedure, background, movements, connections. Brennick answered everything smoothly. Too smoothly, like he'd rehearsed. Every answer plausible. Every alibi verified. Every connection explained. He was either innocent or very well prepared. Torven pushed harder. Asked about financial records, payments, correspondence. Brennick remained calm, provided documentation, showed ledgers. Everything clean, everything legitimate. Until Torven asked about the blood wars. Brennick's expression flickered. Just for a second. Just long enough. What about them? You served under King Valdrin during that period. Were close to him, part of his inner council. I was honored to serve. Did you know about the blood magic? The silence stretched. Brennick's jaw worked. His hands, which had been relaxed, tensed. I knew rumors. Everyone did. I didn't know details. But you suspected. Another pause. Longer. I suspected the king was desperate. Cancer is brutal. Makes people consider options they'd normally reject. Did you help him? No. Brennick's voice was firm. Absolute. I'm a soldier. I fight wars with steel and strategy, not magic. Torven leaned forward, then explained the payments. 3 transfers of gold from your personal accounts to known practitioners over a 5-year period. Brennick went pale. Those were personal matters. Personal matters totaling what most nobles spend in a decade? Try again. I was seeking treatment for my wife. She was ill. Your wife died 7 years ago. These payments continued for 3 years after her death. The old man's face crumbled, just for a moment, then rebuilt itself, harder, colder. You're grasping at straws, trying to implicate me because you need a convenient scapegoat, or I'm connecting dots. You had motive, opportunity, resources, and 3 payments to practitioners who specialized in exactly the kind of magic that killed children. Brennick stood, slammed his hands on the table. I served this empire for 40 years, bled for it, lost my family for it. And you dare accuse me of murdering children? Sit down. No, I'm done being interrogated like a common criminal. Either charge me or release me. Torvin looked at the glass, at Rhaegor behind it, waiting for signal. Rhaegor's instincts screamed wrong. Everything about this felt orchestrated, felt like misdirection. He was about to signal release when the door burst open. A guard, young, panicked. Captain, we've got a situation. What kind? The kind where half the noble houses just declared they're leaving, with or without permission. They're packing, calling carriages, saying the king has no authority to hold them prisoner. Torvin swore, looked at Brennick. Stay here. The old man smiled. It wasn't friendly. Of course, Captain, whatever you say. They left, locked the door, posted guards. Rhaegor met them in the corridor. His face was stone. Let them try to leave. Anyone who attempts to cross the gates gets detained, forcibly if necessary. Sire, that's going to start a conflict. There's already a conflict. Right now, we're just pretending there isn't. Time to stop pretending. They moved through corridors at speed. The palace was chaos. Servants running, guards shouting, nobles arguing with anyone who'd listen. And in the center of it all, Lady Severine, coordinating, directing, organizing the exodus like a general commanding troops. Rhaegor's eyes narrowed. She saw him, smiled, walked straight toward him with confidence that bordered on arrogance. Your Majesty, such a mess. I do hope we can resolve this peacefully. Peacefully would have been cooperating with the investigation. This is rebellion. This is nobility exercising their right to leave an unsafe environment. You can't protect us. 8 dead proves that. So we're protecting ourselves. By fleeing, by withdrawing to our estates until you've secured the palace. Once the threat is neutralized, we'll return. The threat is here. In this building, possibly in this conversation. Severine's smile widened. Careful, Your Majesty. Paranoia makes for poor governance, and corruption makes for dead empires. Your choice which one we're dealing with. I choose neither. I choose survival. She turned, gestured to the nobles behind her. We're leaving. You're welcome to try stopping us. But ask yourself, is maintaining control of a few dozen nobles worth starting a civil war? The question hung there, poisonous. Because she was right. If he forcibly detained them, their houses would respond, would raise armies, would fragment the empire into civil war. But if he let them go, they'd scatter, destroy evidence, coordinate from safety, make investigation impossible. Both options were disasters. He needed a third choice. The explosion shattered his thought process. Massive, close. The palace shook, windows blew inward, glass everywhere, people screaming. Rhaegor's ears rang. His vision swam. Training took over. He was moving before his balance returned, toward the blast, toward danger. Because explosions meant casualties, meant someone needed help, meant Willa. The realization hit like ice water. She'd been in the East Wing, near the library, where the explosion originated. He ran. Didn't think, didn't plan, just ran. The East Wing was devastated. Walls collapsed, ceiling sagging, fire spreading, smoke thick enough to choke. And in the center of the destruction, a figure, small, covered in dust and blood. Willa. She was kneeling, hands pressed against her ears, eyes squeezed shut, alive but hurt. How badly he couldn't tell from here. He crossed the rubble, dropped beside her, hands on her shoulders, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Where does it hurt? Talk to me. She opened her eyes. Gray. Shocked, but focused. I'm okay. Think I'm okay. The blast. Someone tried to... I know. Come on, we need to move. He lifted her. She was light, too light. He'd forgotten that. Forgotten she still carried the weight of 6 years in servitude. Still bore scars that didn't show. Behind them, more explosions. Smaller. Sequential. Like someone had rigged multiple charges. This wasn't random. This was demolition. Systematic. Professional. Someone was destroying the palace from inside. Torvin appeared through the smoke. Blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. Sire, we need to evacuate. The whole structure is compromised. How many charges? At least a dozen. Maybe more. They're timed, sequential, meant to bring down the central supports. Who set them? Don't know. But they had access. Time. Resources. This took planning. Weeks, probably. Rhaegor's mind raced. Weeks. Which meant someone had been preparing this contingency, had known investigations were coming, had rigged the palace to collapse rather than allow evidence to surface, had been willing to kill everyone inside to protect their secrets, get everyone out. Nobility, servants, guards, everyone. I don't care about protocol. I care about survival. Already moving. But sire, I need to find whoever did this. Stop them before they trigger the rest. That's suicide. If the charges go off while you're inside, then I die. But maybe I stop them first. Maybe I save people who don't deserve to burn because I made enemies. Your Majesty. That's an order, Captain. Torvin's jaw clenched. Then he saluted. Formal, respectful. The kind of salute that said, I disagree, but I'll obey. He left, taking Willow with him despite her protests. Rhaegar watched them go. Watched her looking back at him. Saw the fear in her eyes. The terror that said, don't leave me, don't die, don't make me survive without you. But he had to. Because this was his empire, his responsibility, his fault for pushing investigation hard enough that desperate people chose catastrophic action. He turned, moved deeper into the damaged wing, following instinct, following the pattern of explosions. They were moving towards something, some central point, the throne room. Of course. Symbolic. Destroy the heart of the empire, bring down the structure both literally and figuratively. He ran. Through smoke and fire and collapsing corridors, every instinct screaming danger, every rational thought saying this is suicide. He didn't care. The throne room doors were open. Inside, a figure. Setting charges along the obsidian dais. Working quickly, efficiently. Rhaegor recognized the silhouette. Lord Brennick. The old soldier turned. Saw him. Didn't look surprised. Just resigned. Your Majesty. Didn't expect you to come back. Didn't expect you to blow up your own empire. Not my empire. Not anymore. Brennick's hands didn't stop working, kept setting charges, wire running from each to a central detonator. Your father's empire. Built on blood. On magic. On sacrifices people like me made so people like you could rule comfortable. So you helped him kill children. I helped him survive. There's a difference. The cancer was killing him. Fast. Brutal. Without his leadership, the empire would have fractured. Civil war. Millions dead. So yes, I helped him use forbidden magic, helped him extend his life long enough to secure succession, to ensure stability, by murdering innocents, by making hard choices. The kind of choices that keep empires standing. You're too young to understand, too idealistic. You think truth matters more than stability. You think honor trumps necessity. I think neither matters if you sacrifice humanity to achieve it. Humanity is a luxury. Brennick finished the last charge, stood, faced Rhaegor fully. Kings don't get luxuries, they get responsibilities, obligations. They do what must be done. Your father understood that. My father was a monster. Your father was a king. Same thing. The words hit like a blade, because part of Rhaegor feared they were true. Feared that ruling meant becoming the thing he hated, meant making choices that stained your soul but kept your people safe. Brennick seemed to read his thoughts. You're wondering if I'm right, if being king means becoming what I am, what your father was. Are you? The old soldier smiled, sad, tired. Eventually. Power corrupts, responsibility hardens. You'll make your first compromise, then your second. Then one day you'll look in the mirror and see me staring back. I'll die first. Maybe. Or maybe you'll live long enough to understand, to see that empires don't run on truth, they run on carefully maintained lies, and the king's job is maintaining them. Not anymore. I'm done maintaining lies. Then you're done being king. Because the moment you tear down the illusions, the moment you expose the rot, the empire collapses. You think you're saving it. You're destroying it. Then I'll rebuild from ruins. There won't be anything left to rebuild. Brennick gestured to the charges. After this, after the palace falls, the noble houses will fracture. They'll fight, claim territory, raise armies. You'll have civil war, chaos. Exactly what your father died preventing. So you're destroying the empire to save it from being destroyed? That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. If the empire has to fall, it falls on my terms. Controlled, decisive, not slow rot from exposure, not gradual collapse from truth. Quick, clean, mercy. That's not mercy. That's madness. It's pragmatism. The old guard is finished. You made sure of that. So rather than let it die slow, I'm ending it fast, giving the next generation clean ground to build on, by killing everyone inside. Everyone who matters. Everyone who knows. Everyone who's complicit. This palace is full of guilty people. Letting them live means letting the corruption spread. Rhaegor's hand moved to his blade. Step away from the detonator. Can't do that, Your Majesty? Then I'll make you. You could try. Brennick's hand hovered over the trigger. But even if you kill me, the charges are on a fail-safe timer, 15 minutes from first activation, which means in about 3 minutes, this whole structure comes down whether I'm alive or not. You're bluffing. Am I? Test it. Kill me. See if you can disarm 20 charges in 3 minutes while the palace burns around you. The calculation was instant. Brutal. He couldn't. Even if he knew how to disarm explosives, which he didn't. Even if he had tools, which he didn't. Even if time stopped, which it wouldn't, he'd lose. So he made a different choice. His blade stayed sheathed. His voice came out calm. Then tell me, before this ends, who else was involved? Who gave orders? Who coordinated? Brennick's smile was genuine, surprised, respectful. You're smarter than I thought, using your last minutes for intelligence gathering instead of futile heroics. I'm practical, just like you taught me. Fair. The old soldier leaned against the dais. Your father had 5 people in his inner circle. True believers. People who understood what needed doing. Dravine was one, I was another. Lady Severine was third. Severine, of course. Ambitious, connected, smart enough to hide in plain sight. Who else? Lord Hadrian, Chancellor Marcus, who died 2 years ago. And someone you wouldn't suspect. Someone who's been very good at playing innocent. Who? Brennick's eyes gleamed. Figure it out yourself. Consider it a final test. The explosion countdown ticked. Somewhere close, another charge detonated. The floor shook. 2 minutes. Maybe less. Why tell me anything? Why not just stay silent? Because you remind me of me. 40 years ago. Idealistic, honorable, believing the world could be better. I want you to understand what's coming. Want you to prepare. So when you're standing where I am, you make different choices. I already am different, for now. Check back in 10 years, see if that's still true. Rhaegor turned, started walking toward the exit, stopped, looked back. Thank you for your service. For what it's worth, I believe you thought you were doing right. Brennick nodded, placed his hand on the detonator. And I believe you think that matters. It does. Then prove it. Survive. Build something better. Show me I was wrong. Rhaegor ran. Behind him, the final seconds counted down. He cleared the doorway, hit the corridor, kept running. The explosion when it came was massive, catastrophic. The entire central wing collapsed inward. The throne room, the council chambers, everything at the heart of the palace crumbling to rubble and dust. He felt it through his boots, through his bones. The physical sensation of empire falling. Made it to the outer courtyard just as the secondary charges detonated. Watched from safety as the structure that had housed kings for generations dissolved into ruins. Around him, people were screaming, crying, staring at the destruction. He searched faces. Found Willa. She was with Torvin, covered in dust but alive. When their eyes met, relief hit him so hard his knees almost buckled. She ran to him, threw her arms around him, held on like drowning. You're alive. Her voice was broken, sobbing. I thought, when I saw... I'm here. I'm here. What happened? Who did this? Brennick. He was in deep. Part of my father's inner circle. Chose to destroy the evidence rather than let it surface. Is he dead? Chose to die with his secrets. Good. Her grip tightened. Good. But he wasn't alone. Severine was involved. Hadrian. Others. and they're still out there. Then we find them. We've finished this. Rhaegor pulled back, looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, at the steel wrapped in soft features. The empire just fell. The palace is gone. My seat of power is rubble. Half the nobility fled. The other half is dead. I don't have an empire to rule anymore. Then build a new one that doesn't need lies to stand. From what? I've got no palace, no council, no structure, just chaos and guilty people hiding in shadows. You've got truth. You've got witnesses. You've got me. Her hand found his, held tight. And you've got a choice. Rebuild what was or create something better. The words settled on him. Heavy. Impossible. Necessary. Behind them, the palace burned. Centuries of history. Decades of his life. Everything he'd known. All gone. And somehow, staring at the ruins, Rhaegor felt something he hadn't felt in years. Free. Free from his father's legacy. From the lies. From the burden of maintaining systems built on blood. Free to become something different. Something better. Or something worse. The choice was his. He looked at Willa, at Torvin, at the survivors gathering in the courtyard, at the empire in pieces around them. Then we rebuild, not the same, not the old way, new, better, founded on truth instead of lies. How? I don't know yet, but we start by finding everyone who was involved in my father's operation. We drag them into daylight, we make them answer, and then we build something where children don't have to die for kings to rule. That's going to take time, resources, support. Then we find it, make it, earn it, whatever it takes. Willa smiled, small, tired, hopeful, together. The word felt less like a vow now, more like a declaration of war. Against corruption. Against the old guard. Against everyone who thought power justified atrocity. They had nothing but truth, and each other, and determination that bordered on obsession. It would have to be enough, because the alternative was letting his father's legacy stand, was letting children's deaths mean nothing, was accepting that empires couldn't be better. And Rhaegor refused to accept that. He'd tear down every structure, fight every battle, become whatever he needed to become. But he would not let the old way survive. Even if it meant becoming the very thing he'd sworn to destroy. Even if it meant losing himself in the process. Even if it meant the empire burned and nothing rose from the ashes. Some truths were worth dying for. And this one was worth killing for. The ruins of Stormhaven Palace smoldered for 3 days. Rhaegor stood in the ash and watched smoke curl into gray sky. Around him, survivors picked through rubble, looking for bodies, for valuables, for anything salvageable from the wreckage of an empire that had stood for generations and collapsed in minutes. He'd counted the dead. 43 confirmed, 27 missing, presumed buried, guards, servants, nobility who'd been too slow to evacuate. Brennick's final gift to an empire he'd decided wasn't worth saving. The bodies were laid out in rows, covered with whatever fabric could be found. White sheets for nobles, gray cloth for servants. The dead didn't care about the distinction, but the living needed their hierarchies even in grief, especially in grief. Torvin approached. His face was haggard, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. 3 days without sleep did that. 3 days of pulling corpses from wreckage and trying to maintain order when everything fundamental had shattered. Final count on the noble houses. 17 fled during the chaos. 8 remained. The rest are dead or unaccounted for. The ones who fled. Where did they go? Their estates mostly. Some went further, cross-border. They're scared. Of what? Me or the truth? Both, probably. You're the king who destroyed his own palace to expose corruption. That makes you unpredictable, dangerous. The kind of ruler who puts principle over stability. And that terrifies them. It should, because predictable rulers are manageable. But a king who'd burn his own throne to prove a point? That's something else. That's someone who can't be controlled. The observation landed heavy. True. Because Rhaegor had learned something fundamental in the last 3 days. Power didn't come from palaces or thrones or the trappings of authority. It came from willingness. Willingness to sacrifice everything, to lose everything, to stand in the ashes of your own empire and refuse to kneel. That kind of power was terrifying because it had nothing left to lose. What about Severine and Hadrian? No sign. They were in the Exodus group, disappeared into the crowd. Could be anywhere by now. Find them. I don't care how many resources it takes, how many people you need. Find them and bring them back. Alive? Preferably. Dead if necessary. But I want answers before anyone else dies. Torven nodded, hesitated. Sire, the people who stayed, the 8 houses, they're asking questions. Want to know what comes next, how you plan to rebuild, whether there's even an empire left to rule. Good questions. What did you tell them? That you'd address them when ready. That wasn't the right answer, apparently. They want certainty, leadership, direction. They want me to pretend everything's fine, to rebuild the same structure, put a new palace on old foundations and carry on like nothing changed. That would be easier. Easier isn't always better. Rhaegar turned from the ruins, started walking toward the camp they'd established in the outer gardens. And sometimes the hard choice is the only honest one. The camp was organized chaos, tents erected in rough rows, cooking fires, guards on patrol, survivors huddled in groups trying to make sense of catastrophe. It looked more like a military encampment than a royal court. Maybe that was fitting, because what came next would be war, not with armies, with systems, with power structures that had existed for generations and wouldn't die quiet. Willa found him before he reached his tent. She was helping organize supplies, directing servants, making herself useful in ways that didn't require royal authority or noble blood, just competence and willingness to work. She saw him, left what she was doing, walked over with that determined stride he'd come to recognize, the one that said, "I have something to say, and you're going to listen." The noble houses want a meeting, tonight. They're demanding answers. Let them demand. They're threatening to withdraw support, to return to their estates and fortify. They think you've lost control. Maybe I have. Maybe control was an illusion anyway. That's very philosophical, but it doesn't solve our immediate problem. Her eyes searched his face. You look terrible. Haven't slept. Neither have I. But I've been drinking water and eating, which you should try. Later. Now. She grabbed his arm, steered him toward the mess tent. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. And despite what you might think, you're not invincible. The mess tent was crowded, loud. Survivors eating whatever could be prepared in field conditions. It smelled like smoke and unwashed bodies and the particular desperation that came from losing everything familiar. They found a corner, sat on crates that had probably held supplies before being repurposed as furniture. Someone brought food, bread, cheese, dried meat, simple, functional. Rhaegar ate without tasting. His mind was elsewhere, on Severine, on Hadrian, on the conspiracy that went deeper than he'd imagined, on evidence that had burned with the palace. You're thinking too loud. Willa's voice cut through his spiral. I can hear your thoughts from here, just trying to figure out next steps. Next step is finishing that bread. Step after that is sleeping. Everything else can wait. Can it? Because every hour we delay, the people responsible get further away. Get time to regroup, plan, strike back. And every hour you go without rest, you get slower, weaker, more vulnerable. She leaned forward. Look at me. He did. Those gray eyes held steady, unflinching. You've been running on rage and adrenaline for 3 days. That works short term. Long term, it kills you. So you're going to eat, sleep, let your body recover. Then tomorrow you can go back to tearing the empire apart. The practical brutality of it made him smile. Just a little. When did you get so bossy? When I stopped being silent. Turns out I have opinions about things. Lots of them. She took his hand. And one of those opinions is that you matter. Not just as king, as a person. So take care of yourself or I'll make you. How exactly? Haven't decided yet. But it'll be annoying and you won't like it. Threatening the king? That's technically treason. Then arrest me. She smiled. But you'll have to catch me first. For the first time in days, something in his chest loosened. Not much. Just enough to remember that survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about moments like this. About people who cared enough to force you to eat bread in a refugee camp because they refused to watch you destroy yourself. The bond between them pulled. Steady, strong. The kind of connection that said, we're in this together, and that means taking care of each other. He squeezed her hand. Held on. Fine, I'll sleep, but only because you're terrifying. Good. Self-awareness is the first step. The meeting with the noble houses happened at sunset. 8 representatives. The ones who'd stayed. The ones who hadn't fled when the empire started burning. They gathered in what used to be a garden pavilion. Now it was just open space with some intact columns and a view of the ruined palace. Symbolic, maybe. Or just the only structure left standing. Rhaegor stood before them. No throne, no elevation, just standing in dirt with ash on his boots and exhaustion in his bones. You wanted answers. Here I am. Lord Hadrian's younger brother spoke first. Marcus. Mid-30s. Looked like his sibling but lacked the hardness. Where's my brother? Gone. Fled with Severine and others. They're complicit in the conspiracy. When I find them, they'll answer for it. You're accusing my brother of treason without proof. I have proof. Had proof. It burned with the palace. But Willa Silvercrest's testimony stands. She witnessed your brother participating in my father's operations. Witnessed him profit from blood magic. The word testimony doesn't mean much when your only witness is a girl with obvious bias. My bias is called survival. Willa stepped forward from where she'd been standing with Torvin. Your brother helped murder my family, helped silence me, helped cover up atrocities for 8 years. So yes, I'm biased toward truth. Marcus's face darkened. You're a political tool, a convenient symbol he's using to justify tyranny. I'm the last survivor of a massacre your brother participated in. That makes me evidence, not a tool. Lady Saris interrupted. She was older, gray hair, sharp eyes. Ran the Western territories with efficiency that bordered on ruthless. Enough. This accomplishes nothing. She turned to Rhaegor. Your Majesty, we didn't stay out of loyalty to you. We stayed because fleeing would make us look guilty. But patience has limits, so tell us plainly. What happens next? The directness was refreshing, unusual. Most nobles danced around questions like they were afraid of straight answers. Rhaegor met her eyes. What happens next is justice. Real justice. Public trials for everyone implicated. Evidence presented. Witnesses heard. Due process. With what legal system? The courts are in shambles. The palace is rubble. Half the judges fled. Then we build new courts, train new judges, establish systems that work. Or we don't, and we operate on testimony and evidence evaluated by neutral parties. Who decides who's neutral? I do. Until someone proves they're more qualified. That's dictatorship. No. Dictatorship is what my father did. Executed an entire bloodline without trial, without evidence, without mercy. I'm offering the opposite, transparency, process. The thing they should have gotten, pretty words. But words don't rebuild empires. Lord Garrett spoke, youngest of the group, barely 25. Inherited his title 2 years back. What's your actual plan? Specifics. Rhaegor had been thinking about this for 3 days, had turned it over in his mind during sleepless nights and ash-filled days, had come to conclusions that would either save the empire or destroy what was left. Here's what I'm offering. Every house that stands with me through this, that cooperates with investigations, that helps root out corruption. You keep your lands, your titles, your authority. You get to be part of rebuilding, and those who don't lose everything. I'll strip titles, seize estates, redistribute holdings to people who've proven they can be trusted. You can't do that. That's generations of inheritance, of tradition. I can do whatever I have the power to do. And right now, standing in the ruins of the old empire, I have exactly as much power as people give me. So you choose. Stand with me, or stand against me. But choose fast because the window for neutrality just closed. The silence was thick, heavy. Every noble present was calculating, weighing, trying to determine if he was bluffing or if the king who'd let his own palace burn was exactly crazy enough to follow through. Lady Saris smiled. It wasn't warm, but it was genuine. You're either the bravest king we've had in generations or the stupidest. Hard to tell which. Probably both. Does it matter? Not really. I'm in. My house stands with you, not because I believe in your cause, but because you're the only thing preventing complete chaos. And chaos is bad for business. Practical. Honest. He could work with that. Anyone else? Lord Garrett raised his hand, tentative. My house will support the investigation, but I want assurances. Protection for families. Fair trials. You have my word. Trials will be fair. Evidence-based. No executions without conviction. 3 others signaled agreement. Cautious. Conditional. But agreement nonetheless. Marcus and 2 others stayed silent. Faces hard. Unyielding. Rhaegor looked at them. You're choosing opposition. Marcus's jaw clenched. My brother is not a criminal, and I won't stand by while you destroy his reputation based on the word of a girl with every reason to lie. Then leave. Go to your brother. Tell him I'm coming. Tell him evidence is gathering and witnesses are speaking and there's nowhere far enough to hide. The young lord turned, walked away. His 2 allies followed. 6 houses stood with him. Better than none. Worse than he needed. But it was a start. Lady Cerys watched them go. You just made enemies. I've been making enemies since this started. 3 more won't matter. They will if they raise armies, if they convince other houses to join them. You could be facing civil war. Then I'll face it. But I won't compromise on this. Won't let guilty people walk free because holding them accountable is inconvenient, even if it costs the Empire. Even then. Her eyes narrowed, studying him, trying to understand. You really mean that, every word, every set? She nodded slowly. Then I hope you're ready for what comes next. Because the people you're fighting don't play fair, don't show mercy, and they have resources you can't imagine. I know. I've been dealing with them for weeks now. Lost guards, lost advisors, lost my palace. What's left for them to take? Her. Theris's eyes went to Willa. They can take her, the girl you've bonded with, the witness you need, the weakness you're broadcasting to everyone who's paying attention. The words landed like knives. True. Cutting. Because she was right. Willa was vulnerability. Was the one thing they could use against him. The leverage that would make him hesitate, make him compromise, and everyone knew it. Rhaegor's voice came out cold. Let them try. They'll learn what happens when you threaten what's mine. That's exactly what they're counting on. That you'll react instead of think. That you'll make mistakes protecting her. Then they'll be surprised when I protect her and still destroy them. Overconfidence gets kings killed. So does hesitation. I'll take my chances with the former. Karis studied him a moment longer, then shrugged. Your funeral. But when they come for her, and they will come, don't say I didn't warn you. She left. The others followed. Within minutes, the pavilion was empty except for Rhaegor, Willa, and Torvin. The captain's face was grim. She's right. Willa's the obvious target. We need to increase security, move her somewhere secure. No. Willa's voice was firm. I'm not hiding, not running, not letting fear dictate action. You don't understand what you're up against. I understand perfectly. I've been up against it for 8 years. Difference now is I can fight back. Rhaegor looked between them. Both right, both wrong. The contradiction was impossible to resolve. So he chose a third option. We don't hide her. We use her. Put her front and center. Make her visible. Make her untouchable through visibility instead of obscurity. That's insane. Torvin's voice rose. You're making her a bigger target. I'm making her too public to eliminate quietly. Right now, she's a secret witness. Someone they can make disappear without consequences. We make her a public figure. A symbol. Suddenly killing her becomes a political disaster instead of a tactical move. Or they kill her publicly and make an example. Then they make an enemy of everyone who's watching, who sees a young woman trying to seek justice for her murdered family. Martyrdom has power, sometimes more than survival. You're gambling with her life. I'm gambling with everything. Might as well bet it all on one hand. Willa's hand found his, squeezed. I'm willing, if it helps, if it matters. I'll do it. This isn't your choice. Yes, it is. She looked at Torvin. You've been protecting me, keeping me safe, and I appreciate it. But safety isn't the goal anymore. Justice is. And if that means risk, then I'll risk. The captain shook his head, muttered something that sounded like stubborn idiots. Louder, he said, fine. But I'm tripling your guard detail, and if anything happens, it's on me. Not you. Rhaegor's voice carried finality. This is my call. My responsibility. My consequence. Torvin saluted. Stiff. Formal. The kind that meant I disagree, but I'll follow orders. He left. Willa turned to Rhaegor. That was either brilliant or suicidal. Little bit of both, probably. Are you scared? Terrified? But fear doesn't change what needs doing. No, it doesn't. She moved closer, rested her head against his chest. His arms came around her. Automatic, protective. The bond between them hummed. Content, right. They stood like that for a long moment. Two people holding each other in the ruins of everything they'd known, finding strength in connection, in the fact that they hadn't broken yet, hadn't surrendered, wouldn't surrender. Because surrender meant the people who'd murdered her family won, meant the corruption continued, meant children died for nothing, and neither of them could accept that. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, even if it killed them. Bashik. The attack came 2 days later. Not subtle, not covert, full assault, 50 armed men, maybe more. They hit at dawn when the camp was waking, when guards were changing shifts and people were vulnerable. Professional, coordinated. The kind of operation that required planning and resources and someone with military experience calling shots. Rhaegor was awake when it started, had been for an hour. Standing watch because sleep was still elusive, and standing still felt like surrender. The first scream cut through morning quiet like a blade. He was armed and moving before his conscious mind processed threat. Instinct, training, the thing that kept you alive when thinking took too long. The camp erupted into chaos, attackers pouring through the perimeter, guards responding, steel clashing, people screaming. Rhaegor cut down the first attacker who came at him, quick, efficient. The man wore no colors, no identifying marks, just black cloth and deadly intent. Mercenaries, hired killers. Someone had paid well for this. Torvin appeared at his side. Bloody, furious. They breached the eastern perimeter, at least 50. Well trained. This is a kill squad. Where's Willa? Her tent. Guards are holding, but they're outnumbered. Go. I'll handle this. Sire. That's an order. The captain hesitated 1 second, then ran. Rhaegor turned back to the fight. More attackers coming. He met them head on. Blade work, close quarters. The kind of combat that was more butchery than art. No elegance, just survival. 3 more down. 4. His arms burned. His lungs screamed. Adrenaline kept him moving when exhaustion should have dropped him. Around him, guards were falling, outnumbered, overwhelmed. The attackers were too good, too organized. This wasn't random violence. This was execution. Someone wanted him dead. Wanted Willa dead. Wanted everything they'd been building destroyed before it could threaten the old order. A blade caught his shoulder, shallow, painful. He twisted, drove his own blade through his attacker's throat. The man dropped gurgling. Rhaegor kept moving, toward Willa's tent, toward the thing that mattered more than his own survival, because that was what the bond demanded. Protection. The biological imperative that said her life mattered more than his, that losing her would be worse than dying. He reached the tent just as Torvin went down. Big man, tough fighter, but even he couldn't hold against 6 attackers simultaneously. Rhaegor's roar shook the air, pure rage, pure protective fury, the thing that lived in predators when their mate was threatened. He hit the attackers like a storm. No technique, no strategy, just violence, raw and brutal and unstoppable. 2 died before they realized he was there. The others turned, tried to engage. He was faster, stronger, driven by something more fundamental than training or skill. He was driven by the absolute certainty that they would not touch her. The last attacker fell. Rhaegor stood over Torvin, breathing hard, covered in blood. Most of it not his. The captain was alive. Barely. Gut wound, bad. Bleeding too much. Stay with me. Rhaegor applied pressure. Where are the healers? Dead. Most of them. This wasn't an attack. Torvin coughed blood. It was an execution. They killed healers first, then went for witnesses. Willa. Where's Willa? Inside. Safe. But they'll come back. This was just the first wave. The words hit like cold water. First wave. Meaning more coming. Meaning this wasn't over. Rhaegor looked at the tent entrance. Called out. Willa, you hurt. Her voice came back steady. I'm fine. Torvin? Alive. Needs help. She emerged, hair wild, face pale, but moving with purpose. She knelt beside Torvin, examined the wound with hands that shook but didn't stop. This is bad. Needs a healer. Healers are dead. Then we improvise. She started tearing fabric, making bandages. Her movements were practiced, confident. This wasn't the first time she'd dealt with wounds. You don't live 8 years in servitude without learning basic field medicine. Around them, the camp was securing, guards doing head count, calling out numbers. 23 attackers dead, 19 guards killed, dozens wounded. The math was brutal. They'd survived, but barely. And Torvin was right. This was just the beginning. Rhaegor stood, looked at the survivors gathering, at the faces shocked and terrified and looking to him for answers. He didn't have answers, just choices. All of them bad. We can't stay here. This position is indefensible. They know our layout, our weaknesses. They'll come back stronger, better prepared. Where do we go? One of the guards asked. Palace is gone. We've got no fortifications, no walls. Then we go somewhere that does. Rhaegor's mind raced, thinking, calculating. Hartvale Keep. The Silvercrest estate. It's been abandoned for 8 years, might still be standing. Willa looked up from Torvin's wound, her family's home, the place where everything had burned, where her childhood ended and her nightmare began. Going back there would be trauma, would be reopening wounds barely healed, but it would also be strategic, defensible, and symbolic. The place where the conspiracy started, where justice should be served. Can you do it? Can you go back there? Her face was stone, unreadable. Then she nodded. If it helps, if it matters, I'll go. It matters. He crouched beside her, helped with Torvin's bandaging, and I'll be with you, every step. I know. The bond hummed between them, steady, unbreakable. The thing that said we've survived everything so far, and we'll survive this too. They had to believe that, had to hold on to it, because the alternative was giving up, letting the people who'd murdered children and destroyed families win, and that wasn't acceptable. Rhaegor stood, addressed the survivors. We move within the hour, take only what's essential. Weapons, supplies, wounded, everything else stays. We travel light and fast. The guards started organizing immediately, practiced, efficient. They'd evacuated before. They'd do it again. Within 30 minutes, the camp was packed. 67 survivors, 32 wounded. Not enough to defend against a determined assault. Barely enough to function as a unit. But it would have to be enough. They moved out as the sun cleared the horizon, long column, vulnerable, every person scanning the tree line for threats. Rhaegor walked near the front, Willa beside him. Neither spoke. Words felt inadequate, unnecessary. Behind them, smoke rose from what remained of their camp. The attackers had set fires before retreating. Standard tactics. Deny resources to the enemy, everything they'd built in 3 days. Gone. But they were still alive. Still moving, still fighting. That had to count for something. The journey to Hartvale Keep took 6 hours. Through forest and field. Past villages that watched them pass with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. News traveled fast. Everyone knew the king's palace had fallen. That civil war was brewing. That choosing sides meant risking everything. Most chose to stay neutral. Closed doors, shuttered windows. The kind of silence that said, we're not involved, don't make us involved. Rhaegor didn't blame them. Survival meant avoiding powerful people's conflicts. Meant keeping your head down and hoping violence passed you by. But neutrality had its own cost, its own complicity. And someday these people would have to reckon with what their silence enabled. Not today, though. Today was about reaching Hartvale, about securing position before the next attack. The keep appeared through trees like a ghost. 8 years of abandonment had taken their toll. Walls still stood, but vegetation had claimed everything else. Vines crawling up stone, trees growing through courtyards, nature reclaiming what humanity abandoned, but the structure was sound, defensible, and most importantly, far enough from Stormhaven that attackers would need to commit resources to assault it. That bought time to regroup, to plan, to prepare. They entered through gates that hung crooked on rusted hinges. The courtyard inside was overgrown. Wild. But the buildings around it looked intact. Willa stopped just inside the gate. Her breathing had changed, shallow, fast. She was staring at the main house, at windows dark and empty. This was where it happened, where soldiers came, where her family died, where her childhood ended in fire and screaming. Rhaegor's hand found hers, held tight. "We don't have to do this. We can find somewhere else." "No." Her voice was steady despite the shaking in her hands. "This is right. This is where it should end, where justice should be served. Full circle. You're sure?" "I'm terrified. But I'm sure." They moved into the keep, started securing position. Guards checking rooms, clearing vegetation, establishing perimeter. The work was automatic, professional. Within 2 hours, they had a defensible position. Not perfect, not ideal, but survivable. Torvin was settled in what used to be a servant's quarters. Willa stayed with him, tending his wound, making sure infection didn't set in. She worked with hands that knew suffering, that understood pain, that refused to let another person die if she could prevent it. Rhaegor watched her from the doorway. This girl who'd survived impossible things, who'd been broken and rebuilt herself harder, who stood in the ruins of her childhood home and chose to fight instead of flee. She was stronger than he'd ever be, braver than he deserved. The bond between them pulled, insistent, demanding acknowledgement. He tried to protect her by making her visible, by putting her front and center, and they'd responded by sending 50 killers. His strategy had failed. His arrogance had nearly gotten her killed. Lady Cerys had been right. Willa was his weakness, the thing they could use against him, the leverage that would make him choose between empire and person. And he already knew which he'd choose, would choose her every time, would burn the empire to ash if it meant keeping her alive. That made him predictable, controllable, weak. But it also made him dangerous, because a man with nothing left to lose and one thing worth protecting would go to any length, would cross any line, would become exactly the monster necessary to keep that one thing safe. His father had understood that, had made choices that horrified his son, had sacrificed innocence to preserve what he valued, and now Rhaegor stood at the same crossroads, same impossible choice, become the thing he hated, or lose the thing he loved. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. Willa looked up, caught him watching, smiled, small, tired, real. He smiled back, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Because tomorrow, they'd need to make plans, need to figure out how to fight an enemy embedded in every structure, need to prepare for the next assault that would come harder and faster and more brutal. But tonight, standing in the ruins of her past, watching her save a dying man's life, Rhaegor made a decision. He would not lose her, would not let them take her, would not sacrifice her to preserve anything, even if it meant becoming his father, even if it meant betraying every principle he'd claimed to stand for, even if it meant the empire burned and chaos reigned and history remembered him as the king who chose love over duty. Some things were worth damnation. She was one of them. And anyone who came for her would learn exactly how far a king would fall to protect what was his. The night settled over Hartville Keep, cold, dark, quiet, except for guards pacing and wind through broken windows. Somewhere out there, enemies were planning, preparing, marshaling resources for the final assault. Let them come. He'd be ready. And they'd learn that the most dangerous kings weren't the ones who ruled from thrones. They were the ones who had nothing left to lose. They came at midnight, not with stealth this time, with announcement. Torches visible through the forest like stars fallen to earth. The message was clear. We're not hiding. We're not afraid. We're coming, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. Rhaegor stood on the battlements of Hartville Keep and counted lights. 50. Maybe 70. Hard to tell with movement and distance, but enough. More than enough to overwhelm his 67 survivors, half of them wounded. The math was brutal, simple. They would lose, unless he changed the equation. Torvin limped up beside him. The captain's face was gray, pain and blood loss. But he was standing, functional, refusing to stay down. That's an army, not a raiding party. Someone committed resources. Severine, probably. Or Hadrian. Maybe both. Doesn't matter who. Matters that they're here. We can't hold against those numbers. Not with our wounded, not with our resources. I know. So what's the play? Rhaegor's jaw clenched, watching the lights advance. Slow, deliberate, taking their time because they knew the people inside had nowhere to run. No reinforcements coming, no miracle waiting. Just a king, a broken girl, and a handful of survivors standing in ruins because they refused to let corruption win quietly. The play is we make them pay for every inch. Make it cost so much they question whether it was worth it. And we buy time. Time for what? There's no cavalry coming, no allies rushing to our aid. Time to get Willa out, get her somewhere safe, somewhere she can keep fighting even if we fall. Torvin's face went hard. You're planning to stay, to hold them while she runs. Someone has to. Might as well be me. I'm the one they really want anyway. Willa's just leverage. I remove myself from the equation. Maybe they let the others go. That's suicide. That's kingship. Making the choice nobody else can. Sacrificing the piece that matters to save the game. And you think she'll accept that? Think she'll run while you die for her? She won't have a choice. I'll make sure of it. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened, saluted. Formal, final. The kind that said, I understand and I'll follow orders even though I hate them. It's been an honor serving you, sire. The past tense landed heavy. True. Because they both knew how this ended. Knew the sun wouldn't rise on a living king. Rhaegor returned the salute. The honor was mine. You're a better man than I deserved. Torvin's mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Or grief. Hard to tell. You weren't so bad. For a king who burned his own palace down. High praise. The captain turned. Started down the stairs to organize defenses. Rhaegor watched him go. This man who'd been loyal to the point of stupidity. Who'd followed orders even when they were insane. Who'd die tonight because his king had chosen truth over safety. One more corpse in a pile built by someone else's principles. The door behind him opened. He didn't turn. Didn't need to. He could feel her presence. The bond humming. Recognizing. Willa stepped beside him. Looked out at the approaching lights. Her face was calm. Too calm. The kind that came from accepting something terrible. You're planning something stupid. That's a frequent accusation lately. I can tell by the way you're standing, the way you're breathing. You've made a decision and it's the kind that gets you killed. He didn't deny it. Couldn't. She knew him too well. The bond made lies impossible. They're coming for us. For you specifically, because you're the witness. The symbol. The thing that makes all of this real instead of theoretical. I take that away, maybe they stop. By dying. By removing the threat. If I'm gone, you're just a girl with a story. No power. No authority. Not worth the resources to hunt. That's the stupidest logic I've ever heard. Her voice shook. Anger. Fear. Both. They'll kill me anyway. Kill everyone anyway. Because loose ends are dangerous and they've already committed. Maybe. Maybe not. But it's the only play I've got. No, it's not. She grabbed his arm. Forced him to look at her. Those gray eyes blazing. We could run. All of us. Scatter. Make them hunt 67 different targets instead of one concentrated group. And then what? Live in hiding forever? Let them win because survival matters more than justice? Survival is the only thing that makes justice possible. Dead people don't testify, don't rebuild, don't change anything. She was right. Logically, strategically. Everything she said made sense. But sense wasn't what drove him anymore. Something deeper. Something that lived in the part of his brain that predated civilization. The part that said some fights were worth dying for, some principles worth sacrifice. His father had believed that. Had sacrificed children for empire, for legacy, for power. And Rhaegor had condemned him for it. Had sworn he'd be different, better. Would choose honor over expedience. Now he stood at the same crossroad. Same impossible choice. Sacrifice innocent lives or abandon principles. The difference was scale. His father had sacrificed children. Rhaegor was only sacrificing himself. That had to count for something, had to make him different, better. Or maybe it just made him a coward who chose the easy death over the hard life. Willa's hand cupped his face, made him focus. Look at me. Really look at me. He did. I didn't survive 8 years of silence and servitude to watch you throw your life away. Didn't speak again just to lose the first person who treated me like I mattered. You don't get to die for me. That's not how this works. Then how does it work? We survive together, or we fall together. But we don't separate. The bond doesn't let us. You feel it just like I do. She was right. The bond was screaming. Wrong. Threat. Separation. The biological imperative that said distance from mate meant vulnerability, meant weakness. I can't watch you die. His voice broke. Raw. Unpracticed at this level of vulnerability. Can't stand here and let them take you. Can't. Then don't. Fight. Survive. Find another way. She leaned her forehead against his. You're the smartest man I know, the strongest, the most stubborn. Use that. Find the option nobody else sees. There isn't one. I've run every scenario. We're outnumbered, out-resourced, trapped. So we changed the game, stop playing defense, start playing offense. How exactly? I don't know. But I know standing here waiting to die, isn't it? She pulled back, looked at him with eyes that held steel wrapped in softness. So we go down there. We gather everyone. And we figure it out together. Because that's what you've been preaching. Truth, justice, cooperation. Time to practice what you've been selling. The words landed like a slap. True. Brutal. Because she was right. He'd spent weeks telling people they needed to work together, to trust each other, to build something better than the old corrupt system. And here he was planning to die alone because he couldn't figure out another option. Arrogance. Pride. The same thing that had made his father believe he alone could solve problems. That individual brilliance trumped collective effort. He'd sworn he was different. Time to prove it. They went down together, found the survivors gathered in the main hall, faces scared, determined, exhausted, but standing, refusing to break despite everything that should have shattered them. Rhaegor stood before them. No elevation, no throne, just standing in the space with them. You all know what's coming, know the numbers, know the odds. I won't lie to you, this looks bad, looks impossible. One of the younger guards spoke up. Derek, barely 20, so what do we do? Good question. Honest question. What do we do when faced with overwhelming force and no good options? The room was silent, waiting, looking to him for answers. He didn't have answers, just choices. All of them terrible. So he asked instead of told. I need ideas, strategies, anything, because I've run out of brilliant plans and we're down to desperate gambles. The admission hung in the air. Vulnerable, weak. The kind of thing kings weren't supposed to say. But it was also honest, real. And something in the room shifted. People sat up, leaned forward, started thinking instead of waiting to be told. Lady Saris spoke first. She'd been helping with the wounded, hands still bloody. What about negotiation? They want something. We give it to them, by our lives. They want me dead. And Willa silenced. Rhaegor's voice was flat. Not much room for negotiation there. So we give them you. Let them think they've won. Then we hit them while they're celebrating. How exactly? I'd be dead or captured. Maybe not. Saris's eyes narrowed, thinking. What if you fake your death? Make it look convincing. They'll lower their guard, get sloppy. That's when we strike. Rhaegor considered it. The plan had merit, was creative, but it relied on them believing the deception, and these were professionals, trained, disciplined. They wouldn't accept proof without verification, unless the proof was overwhelming, public, undeniable. What if we burned the keep, made it look like I'd rather die than surrender, set charges, collapse part of the structure, leave bodies burned beyond recognition? They'll want to verify, want to make sure. One of the other guards said, so we give them something to verify. Willa's voice cut through. My testimony. I tell them he's dead. That I watched him die, that it's over. They'll believe me because I have no reason to lie, no reason to protect a dead man, except you have every reason, the bond. They'll know, they'll see it. Not if I sell it, not if I make them believe I watched you burn and I'm broken by it. Grief is convincing, trauma is convincing. I've got 8 years of practice being what people expect to see. The room went quiet. Everyone processing, calculating. Torvin broke the silence. It's risky, but it might work. If we can pull off the deception, make it look real. We could turn this from a last stand into an ambush. How many people would need to know the truth? Rhaegor asked. As few as possible. Cerys again. You, Willa, me, Torvin, maybe 2 others we absolutely trust. Everyone else believes it's real. Their genuine reactions sell the lie. That's manipulating our own people. That's surviving. There's a difference. The calculation was brutal, sacrificing trust for strategy, lying to allies for tactical advantage, the kind of thing that made enemies out of friends if discovered. But it might work, might buy them the opening they needed. And wasn't that the same logic his father had used? Justifying lies for greater good? Sacrificing principles for expedience? The parallel made him sick. But the alternative was watching everyone die. Watching Willa die. Accepting defeat because maintaining perfect honor mattered more than survival. Sometimes there were no good choices, just varying degrees of terrible. He looked at Willa, at the determination in her face, at the willingness to do whatever necessary to survive. To win. To make sure the people who'd destroyed her family answered for it. She'd survived 8 years by adapting, by becoming what she needed to be, by sacrificing pieces of herself to preserve the core. Maybe that was the lesson. Not that compromise was weakness, but that knowing what to sacrifice and what to protect was wisdom. His father had sacrificed innocence to preserve power, had protected corruption to maintain stability. Rhaegor would sacrifice his pride, his need to be the hero, his desire for clean victory. But he'd protect the survivors, the truth, the chance for justice, different sacrifices, different priorities, different man. He hoped. All right, we do it. We fake my death, make it convincing, and we turn this from their victory into their massacre. The room erupted. Planning, organizing, people moving with purpose instead of despair. It was remarkable what hope did. Even false hope. Even desperate hope. They had 3 hours before the army arrived. 3 hours to build a deception that would either save them or doom them. Rhaegor moved through the preparations in a daze, watching people work, watching them commit to a plan that required his death. Even fake death felt too real. Willa stayed close, helping, directing, her hands steady even when his weren't. At one point she pulled him aside, into a quiet corner, away from the chaos. You're having second thoughts, just wondering if this makes me like him. Like my father, lying to people, manipulating, justifying it with good intentions. The difference is what you're protecting. He protected power. You're protecting people. That matters. Does it? Or is that just what everyone tells themselves when they compromise? I don't know. Her honesty was brutal, kind. Maybe you won't know until after, until you can look back and see what you built from the lies, whether it was worth it. And if it wasn't, then you'll have to live with that. But at least you'll be alive to try again, to do better next time. Survival doesn't feel like victory. It's not. It's survival. Victory comes later. When you've rebuilt. When you've proven the sacrifice meant something. She kissed him then, hard, desperate. The kind of kiss that said, I might lose you, and I hate this plan, but I understand why we need it. When they broke apart, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Don't actually die out there. This plan only works if you survive the deception. Same to you. Don't sell it so well they actually kill you. I'll try. They returned to the preparations. The next 2 hours were a blur, setting charges, identifying bodies from the previous attack to use as decoys, briefing the few people who knew the truth, preparing the many who didn't. By the time the army reached the gates, everything was ready. The trap was set, the deception prepared. Now came the hard part, selling it, making it real enough that professionals believed, that witnesses mourned, that enemies celebrated. Rhaegor stood in the main hall, surrounded by his people, looking at faces he'd come to know. Derek, who was barely 20, Marcus, who'd lost his brother, Lady Cerys, who'd stayed when fleeing would have been safer, people who trusted him, who believed in what he was trying to build, and he was about to lie to most of them, make them think he was dead, use their grief as camouflage. The guilt of it tasted like ash, but he swallowed it, buried it, did what kings did, made the hard choice, accepted the consequence. The gates shook under impact. Battering ram, systematic, patient. They had time, had numbers, had every advantage except one. They thought they'd already won. That arrogance would kill them, would turn victory into massacre, would prove that underestimating desperate people was the most fatal mistake you could make. Rhaegor looked at Willa one last time, memorized her face. Just in case. Just in case the plan failed, and this was the last moment they had. She looked back, understanding in her eyes. See you on the other side. See you on the other side. The gates splintered, gave way. Armed men poured through, professional, organized. They moved like soldiers, like people who'd done this before, and they walked straight into hell. The first charge detonated in the courtyard. Massive, devastating. Bodies flew, screams echoed. The neat formation dissolved into chaos. That was the signal. Rhaegor moved, not toward the fight, away from it, into the pre-planned route that would take him to the secret passage, to the hiding place where he'd wait, where he'd watch his own death unfold. Behind him, the battle erupted, his guards holding the line, Torvin commanding, people dying so the deception could work. He reached the passage, ducked inside. The stone door sealed behind him. Suddenly he was alone, in darkness, listening to violence through thick walls, helpless, useless, hiding while others fought. It felt like cowardice, felt like betrayal, felt like everything he'd sworn he'd never be. But it was necessary, strategic, the only way the plan worked. Sometimes courage looked like hiding, like swallowing pride, like accepting that your value wasn't in fighting, but in surviving to fight another day. His father had never understood that, had believed showing strength meant never retreating, never showing weakness, never admitting limitation. It had made him brittle, rigid, ultimately breakable. Rhaegor would be different, would bend instead of break, would sacrifice ego to preserve purpose. The sounds of battle raged for what felt like hours, could have been minutes. Time lost meaning in darkness, waiting, wondering. Then the charges he'd set in the main hall detonated. The roar shook stone. Dust rained down. The passage trembled but held. Above him, the hall collapsed, fell in on itself. Anyone inside would have been crushed, buried, burned in the fires that followed, the perfect cover for a king's death, the perfect stage for tragedy. Silence followed, absolute, terrifying, the kind that came after violence, after decisions that couldn't be undone. Rhaegor waited, every instinct screaming to go back, to check, to make sure Willa was alive, that the plan had worked. But going back would expose the deception, would waste the sacrifice, would make the deaths meaningless. So he waited, in darkness, alone. While above him the fate of everything he cared about hung in balance. This was what kingship truly meant, not glory, not power, not sitting on thrones and making proclamations. This, sitting in the dark, waiting, unable to help, trusting that the people you'd led were strong enough, smart enough, brave enough to finish what you'd started. Time crawled. Minutes became hours. Hours became eternity. Every sound was amplified. Every silence was deafening. Finally, movement. Footsteps above, voices. Muffled, urgent. Then a knock. 3 short, 2 long. The signal. Rhaegor pushed the passage door open, emerged into smoke and rubble. Torvin stood there, bloody, exhausted, grinning. It worked. They believed it. Searched the bodies. Found what we planted. Lady Severine herself verified it. Saw the burned corpse we set up. Believed it was you. Where is she now? Gone. Took her people and left. Celebrating. They think they won. Think the threat is eliminated. And our people. 23 dead. Dozen more wounded. But the rest survived. They're scattered like we planned. Waiting for signal to regroup. Willa. Safe. Exhausted. But safe. Sold the grief performance so well I almost believed it myself. She's got a future in theater if this whole justice thing doesn't work out. The relief hit so hard his knees almost buckled. Alive. She was alive. The plan had worked. They'd survived. But 23 more dead. 23 people who'd trusted him, who'd fought for him, who died because he'd asked them to. Their faces would haunt him. Join the others. The running tally of costs paid for principles. For truth. For the stubborn refusal to let corruption win. Was it worth it? Were they closer to justice or just deeper in blood? He didn't know. Couldn't know. Not yet. Torvin's hand on his shoulder. Heavy, grounding. We won, sire. Not clean. Not easy. But we won. That's what matters. Did we? All I see is corpses and ruins. Better than being the corpses in the ruins. The captain's voice was rough. Practical. We survived. That means we get to keep fighting. Keep trying. That's victory enough for now. Maybe. Maybe the captain was right. Maybe survival was victory when the alternative was annihilation. Maybe living to fight again was enough. It would have to be. Take me to Willa. They moved through wreckage, through smoke and collapsed stone. The keep had taken damage. Severe, but parts still stood. Still offered shelter. Willa was in one of those parts, sitting on rubble, hands shaking, face streaked with ash and tears that might have been real or performance. Hard to tell. She saw him, stood, ran, hit him with enough force to knock the wind out. Held on with a grip that said, I thought I lost you. I thought the plan failed. I thought you were actually dead. He held back just as tight, breathing her in, alive, real. Here, we did it. Her voice was muffled against his chest. We actually did it. They believed it. You were convincing. I've had practice. 8 years of being what people expect, of performing, of hiding what's real behind what's useful. You shouldn't have to. Not anymore. Maybe not. But I'm good at it. Might as well use it. They stood like that for a long moment. Two people holding each other in ruins, finding strength in connection. And the fact that they'd survived another impossible thing. Around them, survivors were gathering, coming out of hiding, regrouping. The plan had worked better than expected. The enemy had celebrated victory and left, exposed, vulnerable. Now came the hard part. Hunting them, finishing them, making sure they answered for everything they'd done. Lady Saris approached. Still bloody, still competent. Your Majesty, good to see you not dead. Good to be not dead. What's our status? Severine and her people are heading toward the border, moving slow, celebrating, sloppy. If we hit them now, while they think they won, we might actually end this. With what forces? We've got maybe 40 people still capable of fighting. 40 desperate people with nothing to lose against 70 celebrating ones who think the threat is over. She smiled. Sharp, dangerous. I'll take those odds. Rhaegor looked at the survivors, at faces exhausted and determined, at people who'd lost everything but kept standing, kept fighting. They deserved rest, deserved peace, deserved to stop being soldiers in a war they didn't start. But they wouldn't get that. Not yet. Not until the people responsible answered. Not until justice was more than a concept and became reality. He couldn't ask more of them, couldn't demand more sacrifice, but he could offer choice. We've survived this far by refusing to surrender, by choosing truth even when lies would be easier, by standing when falling would be justified. His voice carried, clear, certain. I'm asking for one more fight, one more sacrifice. But I'm asking, not ordering, anyone who wants to walk away, to find peace, to stop fighting. You have my blessing and my gratitude. Silence. Long, heavy. People looking at each other, considering. Then Derek stepped forward. The young guard. Barely 20. I'm in. We've come this far. Might as well see it through. Marcus followed. Then 3 others. Then more. One by one. Making the choice to keep fighting, to see this through to the end. Not everyone. 7 chose to leave, chose survival over vengeance, chose peace over justice. Rhaegor didn't blame them, didn't judge. Survival was its own kind of courage. Knowing when to stop was wisdom. But 33 stayed. 33 people who'd decided that some things were worth dying for. That justice mattered more than safety. It would have to be enough. They moved out within the hour, light, fast, tracking an enemy that thought it had won, that had lowered its guard, that had made the fatal mistake of celebrating before the game was over. The hunt took 2 days. through forest and field, following trails, intercepting scouts, getting closer. And finally, on the third dawn, they found them. Severine's forces camped in a valley, relaxed, casual, guards posted but not vigilant. Perfect target. Rhaegor stood on the ridge overlooking the camp, 33 survivors beside him, facing 70 enemies who thought they were safe. The math still wasn't good. But math wasn't everything. Surprise was worth 20 soldiers, desperation worth 20 more, and righteous fury was worth armies. This is it. Final fight. We win here or we die here. But either way, we make them remember. Make them understand that you don't murder innocents and walk away clean. The survivors nodded. Grim, determined, ready. Willa found his hand, squeezed, together. They attacked at dawn, silent, swift, hitting the camp from 3 sides simultaneously. The element of surprise was devastating, complete. Within minutes, the celebrating army was chaos. Rhaegor fought his way through. Blade work, close quarters, looking for one target, one person, the architect of so much suffering. He found her near the center, Lady Severine, dressed for travel, weapon out, shouting orders to people too panicked to hear. Their eyes met, recognition, understanding. She knew he wasn't dead, knew she'd been deceived. Her face went from shock to fury to resignation in heartbeats. You, me. He circled, blade ready, looking for opening. You thought you'd won, thought I was dead, thought you could walk away. You were supposed to be dead. We verified. We checked. You checked what I wanted you to see, did what I expected, made the mistake everyone makes, underestimated desperate people. Clever. Her blade came up. Defensive. But it doesn't matter. Even if you kill me, even if you win here, you'll never rebuild. The empire is fractured. Trust is gone. You've destroyed more than I ever could. Maybe. But I'll have destroyed corruption too. We'll have proven that truth matters, that justice is possible, that sometimes burning everything down is better than maintaining something rotten. Naive. Idealistic. Your father understood. Power requires sacrifice, requires hard choices. My father was a monster who murdered children. If that's power, I don't want it. Then you'll never be a real king. Good. I'd rather be a real person. He moved. She blocked. They traded strikes. She was good, trained, experienced, but he was driven, desperate, fighting for something bigger than survival, fighting for the principle that innocence mattered, that corruption had consequences, that the people who destroyed Willa's family would answer for it. The fight was brief, brutal, ended with his blade through her chest, angled up, through the heart. She gasped, blood on her lips, eyes wide, shocked. You were supposed to die. You were supposed to... Everyone dies eventually. Some of us just deserve it more. She collapsed, died with something between rage and acceptance on her face. Around them, the battle was ending. Severine's forces were surrendering, realizing their commander was dead, realizing they'd lost. It was over. Actually over. The conspiracy crushed. The guilty dead or captured. Justice served. Rhaegor stood in the carnage and felt nothing. No triumph, no relief, just exhaustion, bone deep, soul deep, the kind that came from months of fighting, of losing, of sacrificing. Willa appeared beside him, bloody, exhausted, but standing. We won. Did we? All I see is more death, more cost. How many people died so we could have this moment? Too many. But they died for something, for change, for the chance to build better. That has to count. Does it? Or is that just what we tell ourselves so we can sleep? I don't know. Her honesty was brutal, beautiful. Maybe we won't know for years, until we see what grows from all this blood. He pulled her close, held on. Anchor, purpose, reason. The survivors gathered. 33 had attacked, 27 remained, 6 more names for the tally, 6 more faces to haunt his dreams. But they'd won. Against impossible odds, against overwhelming force. They'd survived and conquered. That had to mean something, had to be worth the cost. It had to be. The trials took 3 months. Public. Transparent. Every piece of evidence presented. Every witness heard, every accused given chance to defend. Some did, some couldn't. The evidence was overwhelming, damning, undeniable. 14 nobles were convicted, executed publicly. Their deaths were quick, professional. Rhaegor refused to make spectacle of it, refused to turn justice into entertainment. Death was consequence, not celebration. 23 others were stripped of titles. Land seized, redistributed to people who'd proven trustworthy, who'd fought for truth, who'd earned reward through sacrifice. It wasn't perfect, wasn't clean, but it was something, was a start. The empire began to rebuild, slowly, painfully, with arguments and setbacks and moments where everything almost fell apart again. But it held, barely, precariously, but it held. Because the alternative was accepting that corruption won. The children died for nothing. That Willa's family was erased for someone else's comfort. And nobody wanted that. Not even the nobles who'd initially fled. Most came back, tentative, cautious, testing whether the new order was real or just pretty words that would fade under pressure. Rhaegor showed them, day by day, decision by decision, that words meant action, that truth was non-negotiable, that justice applied to everyone, or it meant nothing. It was exhausting, frustrating, harder than fighting ever was. But it was also necessary, was the price of building something better, of proving that empires could evolve, could become more than their worst moments. 6 months after Severine's death, Rhaegor stood in the courtyard of the new palace. Not in Stormhaven. Too many ghosts there. Too much ash. They'd built elsewhere. Smaller. Simpler. Without the grandeur that encouraged corruption. Willa found him there. She did that. Found him when he was thinking too loud. When the weight got heavy. When he needed reminder that he wasn't alone. "You're brooding," her voice carried affection. "Concern. I can tell by the way you're standing. Just thinking about cost. About everyone who died so we could have this. Whether it was worth it, you'll never know for certain." She took his hand. "None of us will. We just have to believe it was. Have to make it worth it by what we build. And if we fail, if this all collapses, then we tried. Then we stood for something. Then we refused to let evil win without a fight. That's worth something even if the empire falls." He pulled her close. This woman who'd survived impossible things, who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger, who'd chosen to fight when hiding would have been easier. She was right. Success wasn't guaranteed. Victory wasn't permanent. They might fail. Might watch everything collapse despite best efforts. But they'd tried. Had refused to accept that corruption was inevitable. Had proven that truth mattered. That justice was possible. That empires could be better than their founders. That had to count. Had to mean something. A year later, they formalized the bond. Not with ceremony. Not with pageantry. Just with choice. With commitment. With the decision to face whatever came next together. Willa became Luna of Stormhaven, not through birthright, through merit, through sacrifice, through proving that leadership wasn't about bloodlines but about character. She reformed systems, gave voice to the voiceless, protection to the overlooked, built networks that ensured no child would disappear into blood magic operations again. It wasn't perfect. Gaps remained, problems festered, but it was better, measurably, demonstrably, better. And Rhaegor learned that kingship wasn't about dominating, wasn't about being strongest or smartest or most ruthless. It was about service, about sacrifice, about accepting that your value came from how you uplifted others, not how you elevated yourself. His father had never understood that, had believed power flowed from fear, from control, from willingness to do terrible things. He'd been wrong. Power flowed from trust, from connection, from proving you'd protect the vulnerable even when protecting them was costly. It took years for Rhaegor to fully understand that. Years of mistakes and corrections, of falling and rising, of choosing principles over expedience even when expedience would be easier. But he learned, grew, became something his father never was, a king who ruled through influence instead of fear, through respect instead of domination, through truth instead of carefully maintained lies. It wasn't easier, wasn't comfortable, but it was honest, was real, was something he could look at in mirrors without flinching. 5 years after the palace burned, Rhaegor stood on the same battlements of Hartveil Keep. They'd rebuilt it, made it headquarters for Willa's reforms, symbol of transformation, of how something destroyed could be remade into something better. Willa joined him. They stood in comfortable silence, watching sunset paint the sky red and gold. Beautiful, peaceful, hard-won. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Everything you sacrificed, everything you lost." "Every day." He was honest. Couldn't be otherwise. Not with her. "I think about the people who died, the choices I made, whether there was better way. But you do it again, without hesitation. Because the alternative was letting corruption stand, was accepting that some people were worth more than others, that power justified atrocity. I couldn't live with that. Good. Because I couldn't have loved a man who could." The words settled between them, heavy, true. Because love wasn't gentle, wasn't easy. It was choosing someone anyway. Despite flaws, despite costs, despite impossible circumstances, they'd chosen each other in fire and blood and ruins, had fought for that choice, had protected it against everything the world threw at them. And they'd won, not perfectly, not cleanly, but definitively. Had proven that bonds forged in adversity were stronger than anything comfortable circumstance created. The empire spread before them, changed, evolving, still imperfect but getting better, still flawed but trying, still carrying scars but healing. It would take generations to fully transform, to root out all corruption, to establish systems that consistently protected the vulnerable, but they'd started, had proven it was possible, had laid foundations that others could build on. That was legacy, not gold or palaces or monuments, but the quiet transformation of systems that made life better for people who'd never know his name. Rhaegor had learned that true dominance wasn't control, it was influence, was changing hearts and minds, was proving through action that better was possible. His father had dominated through fear, through blood, through atrocity disguised as necessity. Rhaegor dominated through example, through sacrifice, through the stubborn refusal to accept that evil was inevitable. It was harder, took longer, cost more, but it was real, was lasting, was something worth passing to the next generation. The crown sat heavy on his head, would always sit heavy, because leadership was burden, was weight, was carrying responsibility for thousands of lives and thousands of choices. But he carried it, would continue carrying it, because someone had to. Because walking away would mean all the sacrifice was wasted, all the deaths meaningless. And he refused to accept that, refused to let Willa's family die for nothing, refused to let corruption win by default. So he stood and fought and built, day by day, choice by choice, proving that empires could be better than their worst moments, proving that kings could be human instead of monsters, proving that love wasn't weakness but the strongest foundation anyone could build on. Willa's hand found his, held tight. Anchor, partner, equal. The bond between them steady, unbreakable. The thing that said we survived everything the world threw at us and we're still standing. They stood together as sunset faded to twilight. Two people who'd lost everything and found something worth keeping. Who'd fought impossible battles and somehow won. Who'd proven that truth was worth dying for. But more importantly, was worth living for. Worth building for. Worth transforming the world for. The empire didn't fall. It evolved, slowly, painfully, with setbacks and struggles. But it changed, became something better, something worth defending not from fear but from belief. And in the quiet moments, beneath moonlight, beyond politics and power, and the weight of crowns, Rhaegor understood the greatest truth of all. A crown didn't make a king powerful. The throne didn't grant authority. The palace didn't create legitimacy. What made a king powerful was the person who chose to stand beside him when standing was hardest, who refused to let him face darkness alone, who proved that connection was stronger than any weapon. Willa had saved him, not with arrows or blades or strategy, but with presence, with stubborn refusal to let him become his father, with love fierce enough to burn through every lie he told himself. She was his strength, his weakness, his reason. his purpose. Everything that mattered contained in one person who'd survived the unsurvivable and still chose kindness. He'd protected her because the bond demanded it, because instinct screamed, because biology insisted. But he'd fallen in love with her because she'd proven that strength came in forms he'd never imagined. That survival was its own kind of power. That refusing to break was the bravest thing anyone could do. They'd built an empire on that. On the truth that human connection mattered more than dominance. That protecting the vulnerable was real power. That sometimes burning everything down was necessary to build something better. It wasn't the empire his father envisioned. Wasn't built on fear or blood or carefully maintained lies. It was built on truth, on sacrifice, on the principle that everyone mattered, that justice wasn't luxury but necessity. It was imperfect, would always be imperfect, because humans were flawed and systems reflected that. But it was better, measurably, demonstrably, better, and that was enough, was victory, was proof that the fight had been worth it, that the cost, however terrible, had purchased something valuable. They'd survived, had conquered, had transformed, had proven that empires could evolve, that kings could learn, that love could be foundation instead of weakness. And in the end, standing in twilight with the person who mattered most, Rhaegor understood that this was what power really meant, not controlling others, but choosing someone and being chosen in return. Building something together that neither could build alone. That was dominance. That was strength. That was the thing worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. Everything else was just noise, just distraction, just the comfortable lies people told themselves to avoid facing hard truths. He'd faced hard truths, had survived them, had used them to build something better, and he'd done it with a woman who'd been silenced and found voice, who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger, who'd lost everything and chosen to fight anyway. She was his Luna, his equal, his partner, the thing that made all of this matter, that transformed duty into purpose, that changed burden into blessing. And together, they'd keep building, keep fighting, keep proving that better was possible, that empires could heal, that love could survive anything, because they'd already survived everything, had already conquered the impossible, had already proven that two people who refused to break could change the world. The rest was just details, just execution. Just the long, slow work of transformation that would take generations to complete, but started here, with them, with this moment, with the choice to keep standing when falling would be easier. They'd stand, would continue standing, would prove that truth and justice and love were worth every sacrifice, every cost, every moment of suffering. Because in the end, those were the only things that mattered, the only things worth building on. The only foundations that lasted beyond the people who laid them. Everything else burned, palaces fell, empires collapsed, but truth endured, justice persisted, love survived, and the people who chose those things, who fought for those things, who sacrificed for those things, became the foundation that others built upon. That was legacy, that was victory, that was the meaning behind all the blood and ash and suffering, not monuments or gold or crowns, but the quiet knowledge that they'd made the world slightly better, had proven that better was possible, had given the next generation something worth protecting. And standing there with Willa's hand in his and twilight painting the world in gentle colors, Rhaegor was content, not happy. Happiness was luxury earned through peace, but content, satisfied, certain that every choice, however terrible, had been worth it, that every sacrifice had purchased something valuable, that every death had meaning because the survivors made meaning from them. He'd never stop grieving the cost, never stop seeing the faces of people who died for his principles, never stop wondering if there'd been a better way. But he'd also never regret the choice, never wish he'd chosen comfort over truth, never accept that corruption was inevitable. That was his burden, his crown, his purpose. And he'd carry it until someone stronger could take over, until the systems were established enough to survive without him. Until the empire had transformed so completely that kings like his father were impossible. Then he'd rest. Then he'd lay down the weight. Then he'd find peace. But not yet. Not while work remained. Not while people still needed protection. Not while justice was still something that required fighting for instead of something guaranteed. So he stood and fought and built with the woman who'd saved him standing beside him, with the empire they'd forged together spreading before them, with the future uncertain but hopeful. Together. Always together. Because that was the only way anything worth building ever got built. That was the foundation. The secret. The truth his father never understood. Power wasn't isolation, wasn't dominance without connection. Real power was standing with someone who chose to stand with you. Building something neither could build alone. Facing impossible odds and refusing to surrender. That was strength. That was victory. That was everything that mattered, contained in two people holding hands while the sun set on an empire they'd torn down and rebuilt better. That was enough. That was everything. That was the ending they'd earned through blood and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to accept that better was impossible. And it was good.